Well, a pleasant good afternoon to everyone out there in Irish breakdown country. I am Vince D'Addario. I am the football analyst. You like that? Is that the next shirt?
No, because then you're going to ask for royalties, and I'm not trying to deal with all that.
That's true. That's fair. That's
I'm
fair.
just joking. I do like that. That may have to be a T-shirt down the road.
I like that too. Anyway, I'm Vince. That's Brian, and we are doing an impromptu mailbag today because there is some breaking news out there that we want to talk about, and we didn't know if that would be a full show, so we figured, you know what, we're just going to open it up to everybody, and we're going to talk about a few different topics and kind of whatever you guys bring to the table. And I mean, I love Mailbag Friday anyway, so why not Mailbag Wednesday? Is really what it comes.
I asked Vince what he thought about maybe doing a mailbag today, and before I even finished the sentence, he was like, "Yes, let's do that." So Vince loves him some mailbag.
I do love me some mailbag, but we do have a little bit of breaking news. Jay Brunelle has announced that he is going to be leaving the University of Notre Dame. Surprise, Brian?
No, this is not. I'm not surprised. This has been something that's been kind of thought as a possibility for a little while. There's a lot of reasons that went into Jay's decision to leave. This isn't just about playing time, and there's a lot of things that went into it, and it's an unfortunate thing, but he had a really rough first year. He got sick that didn't have to do with COVID. Then I believe he dealt with some COVID-related stuff. It's just been a really rough year for him, and I think it was kind of time for Jay to get a fresh start. This wasn't a playing time thing. Jay didn't come to Notre Dame with the illusion that he was going to be starting as a freshman. This is not that kind of situation. This is just he needed a change. So it's now the fourth wide receiver that's left Notre Dame this offseason. And from a transfer standpoint, the fourth receiver that left with eligibility remaining. And it's getting to be a bit of a problem.
I don't know if I want to use the word disturbing, but when you bring up a number like that from one position group, and I realize also maybe behind corner and offensive line, the wide receiver room is going to be the biggest, but still four is
it's not big compared to what it needs to be now.
Yeah,
I mean, you're now single digits,
Well,
I mean,
that's what I'm saying. It's supposed to be a big room, and when you lose four, that's still a chunk that is missing.
When I look at it, Jordan Johnson was obviously a big loss, right? Most of us agree that he was a very good player. But when you look at the others, Kendall Abdur-Rahman, Jay Brunelle, Micah Jones, none of them by themselves are necessarily devastating losses. Losing Jay Brunelle stings because he's a good football player. And anytime you lose a good football player, that's going to hurt. But that transfer alone doesn't really hurt Notre Dame, especially in 2021. Losing Kendall Abdur-Rahman, to me, was an even bigger loss because now your roster is getting real thin on guys that are playmakers with the ball in their hands, right?
Yeah.
But even then, that didn't crush it for 2021. Losing Micah Jones didn't crush it for 2021. Although now, Brian Kelly's talking about how Kevin Austin is, not going to be full to go when we get to fall camp, and how healthy is he going to be? And so now you're like Kevin Austin, and then after that, what? It's Joe Wilkins, Xavier Watts, Deion Colsey.
We've talked
maybe
about
you could have used Micah Jones at this point in time. So it's the cumulative effect of those four receivers leaving. And I think to your point, Vince, look, transfers are going to happen, especially in today's era. But when you're losing four from one position in one offseason, If I don't know what it's going to take for Brian Kelly to get his head out of the sand when it comes to the receiver position, I don't know what it's going to take. And there's a lot of things that people will say, well, look, they've got the three freshmen coming in. But this is also a coach who has shown no ability to get freshmen ready to play.
Correct.
None.
Get them on the field.
Right? None. I mean, we have yet to see a freshman catch more than 5 passes since Dell Alexander's been in Notre Dame, right?
Right.
And that was Kevin Austin. And by the end of the year, Kevin Austin was basically out of the rotation. Right?
He was, yeah.
We didn't see any of the 2019 receivers. There's now 2019 receivers left on the roster at receiver. Cam Hart's still there, but Cam Hart's not playing defense. There's only one of the 2020 receivers left on the roster. That's Xavier Watts. They didn't even finish. They finished a full year, and that's it. And it's down to one. And you say, well, look, all the freshmen. Again, we just talked about that. You're looking at next year. You got 9 receivers on the depth chart right now. 9. Avery Davis is done after this year. Then you have 4 seniors: Lawrence Keys, Braden Lindsey, Kevin Austin, Joe Wilkins. What are the odds that Notre Dame brings back 4 fifth-year seniors next year?
They may have to at this point.
Well, I mean, it's not even about that. It's not always their choice.
Right.
I mean, look, Kevin Austin may want to come back, but is the university going to allow him back? with all the things that have happened there. I mean, there's so many things that you have to look into this, Vince, that makes this troubling. And you say, well, you just bring in a bigger freshman class. I go back to my original point. You're dealing with a position where the current receivers coach has shown no ability to get freshmen ready to play.
And high level recruits will go to a school. I mean, in general,
well, even if they get those recruits, right? I mean, even if they get the recruits, let's just hypothetically say that Notre Dame stops being insane when it comes to receiver recruiting and stops offering all these power forwards and takes Tobias Merriweather, CJ Williams, and they say, hey, Xavion Bradshaw, we love you. We want you to come, right? And then he comes, and along with Amorian Walker, which I think most people in this chat and would be like, I'd love that class.
Yeah, it's four.
I go back to the point that this is a coach that has not shown the ability to get freshmen ready to play. And if your response is, well, Kevin Stepherson and TJ, different coach.
Right.
Different position coach. Right? This is a coach that has barely been able to get sophomores on the field, much less freshmen.
Right.
And so, this is problematic. This is problematic. And so there's all types of ways to spin it. And, Matt Salerno's doing good. No, Matt Salerno is not Chris Fink. And Chris Fink, you already know, you're not beating Georgia with Chris Fink. We already saw that. And he had 2 opportunities to make plays against Georgia in the second half of 2 different games and dropped the ball both times. One ended up with a pick. You scored 3 points in your game with Chris Fink at slot. Now, again, he's not the reason they scored 3 points, but he was part of that offense.
Part of the equation. I mean,
look, Matt Salerno, if you're talking to me about Matt Salerno, then you should stop, look in the mirror and say, what am I doing? Because now you're just spinning it. I mean, that's all that is. It's just spinning it. And again, in a normal circumstance, I would say that this is a situation where Notre Dame has a depth chart that in theory you should be fine with. They should be able to have the guys at receiver to be able to have a successful receiving core. But we have to look at this and say, this is a situation, Vince, where, and Vince is still listening, even though he's not in the thing, but this is a situation where you have a combination of youth, even though it's talented youth, with a position coach that has shown no ability to get those guys ready to play. So on paper, Notre Dame should be okay. They should be okay this year. They should be okay next year, assuming they do the right things with recruiting, which right now I'm not overly confident in. But when you combine that with the fact that we just have not seen a track record of being able to get younger players ready to play, it certainly proves problematic. So when you look at it from this standpoint, I think at some point in time, Coach Kelly has to be able to look in the mirror and say, we're not developing young players. We got all these kids transferring out. We're not able, we're struggling to keep guys healthy. We really haven't had a single receiver recruiting class pan out so far. And right now, Notre Dame's having to offer, guys that are bit projects from Canada and things like that. And Nicholas Anderson, guys that are solid players, but they're exactly what you've had for years as you've been talking about needing more playmakers. And you've scored 14 points against Bama. You scored 10 points against Clemson in the postseason. You scored 3 points in another postseason game against Clemson. You scored 14 points against Alabama. And in each of those instances, you were in situations where you had big receivers for the most part were your primary targets. There's been one season where Notre Dame has shown explosiveness in the pass game and the ability to score points against a top team, and that was when they scored, 28 points against Ohio State? I don't think they had a single receiver in that rotation that year that was over 200 pounds. It was all smaller, more explosive, fast guys. So it's kind of like I just want to bang my head up against the wall and just like knock myself out and just wake up in an alternate reality, because it's like you look at it and all the data tells you a certain story. When you have nothing but big receivers, you're going to be good. But when you get into those big games, you're going to struggle because you have no diversity amongst your receiving core, right? Right. And then you get into these situations where you've had 1 year where you had smaller, faster receivers. Remember, Chris Brown, who was like 6'2", 190, was the biggest receiver on that 2015 receiver corps. That was by far your most explosive group of receivers, by far. And yet you're still trying to play power forward football with your receivers. And you look at the recruiting class, and you say, okay, 2021, it's going to look a little bit different, as we've talked about, but you're not recruiting guys like that anymore. Right. You're recruiting the big guys. And so it's really confusing, Vince. And there's just so many things that you can look at and say, what the heck is going on here? And you have to ask yourself, at what point in time does Brian Kelly wake up and say, yeah, we're not doing this right. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like he's willing to do that. And I don't know if Jay Brunelle leaving is even enough of a cumulative effect for Brian Kelly to be able to look in the mirror, because I don't think Jay Brunelle's situation really had anything to do with Coach Alexander. It had to do with other things. So I don't know if anything's going to change. That's the disappointing thing.
Well, and I think, wouldn't it be fair to say, I mean, you can dive into this a little bit more if you want to, but Jay Brunelle leaving this year doesn't hurt the team this year.
I think there's only one of the 4 transfers hurts the team this year. Only one of them.
I agree with that.
But the cumulative effect to me is going to have a down the road impact.
Right.
It wouldn't in normal situations. This is, again, Vince, I'll repeat this, and then I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'll repeat this.
Okay.
We have to look away from the depth chart, because if your response is, well, they have got this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, that's fine. But the reality is in 2021, you're going to hope to have 2 of the fifth-year seniors. So let's just say they bring back Keys and Lindsay. Let's say they bring back 3 of them and Wilkins,
okay.
Right? After that, you've got Xavier Watts, who you have yet to be able to develop, 3 rising sophomores, and 3 to 4 incoming freshmen. Again, on paper, that looks fine. But we're talking about, as I said again, you have to look at the specific context of Notre Dame. If this were Clemson, I'd have no concerns. If this was Ohio State, I have no concerns.
Right.
Unfortunately, Coach Alexander has not shown the ability to get sophomores ready to play that much less freshmen.
Right.
And so that to me is why a lot of this is very concerning. So yeah, it doesn't necessarily impact you in 2021. I don't think that's going to happen. Yeah. Jay Brunelle was not going to be a factor in the 2021. He wasn't. But the cumulative of down the road is what concerns me.
Do you? I mean, I know this is complete speculation on your part, is where this question comes from. But is it Coach Kelly just looking at this year and not worrying about the future, or does he not have the long term view that, okay, hey, maybe losing 4 kids might be a problem? I mean, I don't. Again, speculation on your part, but I feel like he's not looking at the long term issue here.
It would seem that way. I mean, and we've seen this before. We've seen situations in the past where it looked like Brian Kelly wasn't tuned into what was going on in his position.
Yeah.
We look at running back for years. You had running back, it was a depth chart that for a few years there just seemed to be a lot of kids getting in trouble at that position.
Right.
Beyond normal positions. And that to me was problematic.
Gotcha.
You look at situations where the running back recruiting went bad. I mean, and you'd have the typical, people that want to spin everything. Well, running backs just, highly ranked running backs just don't want to go to class. And it's amazing that they didn't have that problem, from 2007 to when Tony Alford left, right? So you had Bernie Parmalee recruiting. He had 2 top 100 backs in 2007. You land a 5-star back in 2006. You land a top 100 back in 2008 in Jonas Gray. I mean, you never had these problems until Daltrey Denson showed up.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden, Daltrey Denson leaves, and all of a sudden you get Chris Tyree, and you get Kyron Williams, and you get Logan Diggs, and you get Aldrich Estime, and you got Jadarian Price, and all of a sudden running back recruiting works again. But it took Brian Kelly, 4 years to figure that out? Right. And so those are the problems, is he has not shown the ability to say, I mean, it always tends to be the player's fault.
Sure.
Because if it's an assistant coach's fault, then that means
it's his fault.
It's Brian Kelly's fault.
Yeah.
And I hope I'm wrong about that, but you look at the pattern, the same thing with Brian Van Gorder. Well, we didn't have good enough players. I mean, I don't know how. Response. I mean, if he didn't recognize that Brian Van Gorder was a problem until it was too late, what makes you think he's going to look at Dell Alexander as a problem, especially since he's getting receivers drafted every year?
Good point.
And so that's where you come from, and you say, well, if he doesn't see it now, he's not going to see it.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
And I think that's the frustrating part, because yes, there are receivers getting drafted, but there's just no impact by young receivers at all. And look, and we've broken this down a million times, but the fact that guys are just being sent over to the scout team and just forgotten about, they're not part of the install. They're not part of any of that.
Yeah.
It's just
right.
The whole situation is very frustrating to me, and I just don't know how I don't know how it's not seen. I don't understand how it's not being a problem, right? Yeah. You know what I mean? I don't know. Just it's very frustrating to me. But anyway, so Jay Brunelle has left. Potential disturbing trend, or it is a disturbing trend. and we will see.
Mm-hmm.
We will see. So let's talk about the next piece of, I don't know if you'd even call it breaking news, but Caleb Evans puts out yesterday on his Twitter.
Yeah, there's nothing. There's no news to report yet.
There's no news, but he puts out on his. And I just want to throw this out there. He puts out on his Twitter, "Hey, follow me on Instagram. There's news coming." And so, like, Brian's calling me. It's like, "Hey, there might be something you want to do a show,
just in case."
And like, we're like, kind of, twiddling our thumbs, waiting. Well, we're still waiting. Nothing has been announced, but apparently something's forthcoming at this point.
Now, he just put on his Instagram, he just put up a thing of him in a Georgia uniform and saying, "Official offer post, blessed and grateful to receive an offer from the University of Georgia, #not committed." Now, if that's the news that he was alluding to last night, I'm gonna be very frustrated. I'm gonna be very, very frustrated.
That is very frustrating.
Yeah.
But, so that's the update as far as where Caleb Evans is right now, and I will echo what you said yesterday. The staff has done absolutely everything to bring this kid in, and so if he goes someplace else, it is not going to be a knock on.
I think that Georgia thing is going to be interesting. And here's what I mean by that. Like right now, it looks like it's Notre Dame, the school that I think Caleb knows offers him the most in most areas. And then there's Missouri, where he knows the position coach.
Sure.
I think right now those are the two most likely options for him, although Texas is still battling and they've got the whole close to home thing going on.
Right.
If he visits Georgia, that's going to tell me that he's looking for something different than Notre Dame.
Correct. I agree with that as well. And that is it's upsetting. But if he's not looking for what Notre Dame offers, then it is what it is.
I'm not saying he isn't. I'm just saying that visit would tell me that. Hopefully he kind of in the next day or two makes a decision, and because if he makes a decision this week, I feel Notre Dame's in a good place.
Yeah,
but he's got to make that decision. So,
gotcha. So that pretty much constitutes the quote unquote breaking news. Jay Brunelle leaving, Caleb Evans still not making a decision, but saying he's going to make a decision. So you want to jump into the comments, Brian? I think that's where we're at. So let's go for it here. Tommy says, "I'm guessing we are now looking at a four-man wide receiver class now. Coach Alexander better pick it up." I would assume that is the case, but we've had issues with the way that the receivers have been recruited up to this point. I don't know that that's going to change.
Look, I mean, four-man receiver class. Who's in the four-man receiver class? That's going to be my question.
Sure.
Could they get four players in this class? Sure. But is it going to be a Maureen Walker, Nicholas Anderson, the kid from California? I mean, if it's those three of those kids in the top four, then that's an underwhelming recruiting class. And you can spin it all you want about upside and all these other kind of things, but you got four power forwards, and that's really what you're going for. I mean, it's concerning.
And that doesn't fit the offensive philosophy that we think is moving forward. And that also tells us that maybe that's not here to stay, which is obviously a problem. Kevin Thomas says another wide receiver out through transfer. Jay Brunelle gone, less talented than the other wide receivers, but speaks to an issue within. Also, one wide receiver left from the 1920 recruiting classes, Xavier Watts,
who has caught 0 passes.
That is disturbing. And he says, of course, it's not counting Cam Hart as he switched positions. Absolutely. That's a trend that I don't like.
Can I tell you a text that I got from a friend of mine today?
Yeah, absolutely.
A buddy of mine texted me, and everybody's freaking out about the depth chart of receiver. And he texted me, and he goes, "Why is everyone so worried about our wide receiver depth? Brian Kelly only plays 3 guys anyway. We have enough for his liking."
I hate to say that. I would love for that to be a joke, but I'm not sure that it is. Yeah. Tommy says it's time to turn up the heat on Bradshaw. We agreed, but we haven't seen any evidence of that as of yet. But it is early in the Jay Brunelle exodus, so maybe that will come. Another ND receiver from the 2020 class is transferring. How worrisome is this? We just talked about it, right, Brian? I mean, it's worrisome not only for this year, but moving forward. So it's distracting.
Yeah, look, you could chalk it up and just say maybe they misevaluated some guys. Okay, but then it comes down to, well, who was doing the evaluating? I mean, are we just going to blame this all on Chip Long again? right? I mean, is that what we're going to do? Oh, it's all Chip Long's fault because they're not doing anything different, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, it's concerning. I'm trying not to make it out to be a bigger issue than it is because, again, Jay Brunelle by himself transferring is not necessarily problematic. For me, it's the cumulative impact of him plus Kendall or Abdur-Rahman plus Micah Jones, plus Jordan Johnson, plus your inability to get freshmen ready to play. So, like, you could say, well, look, they're going to be fine. They got Deion Coles, they got Lorenzo Styles, but again, what evidence do you have that they're going to be able to get those guys ready to play at the level you need to go out and compete for a championship? I mean, that's the problem. That's the problem. And a lot of those older players have struggled to stay healthy. So yeah, this is problematic. This is certainly problematic, and we can bury our heads in the sands and say, oh, don't worry, Matt Salerno's fine. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah,
there are places you can go for that. If you just want to be told that everything is awesome, that's cool. I appreciate that. I respect that. Some people just want to hear positive things all the time, and I have no problem with that. But I mean, I'm not going to lie to you just to make you happy. So we're going to be honest about it.
Kevin asks, are they still pushing for Andre Green?
I wouldn't say they're pushing. They're still recruiting him. He is set to visit Notre Dame in the fall. He's got a pretty slow recruitment right now. He's not in a hurry to make a decision. So I think that, but see, ultimately, Vince, that's my biggest fear with this 2022 receiver class. There are some dudes on the board. Tobias Merriweather, CJ Williams, Andre Green, Savion Bradshaw. There's some dudes in this class. My question is, my concern is Notre Dame's staff going to have the patience to see that through, or are they going to panic?
Just bring people in to bring it in. Yeah.
And you get Nicholas Anderson. Well, you should get Nicholas Anderson. You're the biggest school pushing for him. You're the best program pushing for him. You got the kid from Canada who's a solid player, but like, if you can't get him, if you want him, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Because you should be able to get him. You're not battling anyone. You're not battling Ohio State or Clemson or Georgia or Ohio State or Alabama for him. You're not battling any of those programs for these kids, for those type of kids. Are you willing to have the confidence in yourself and the confidence in your staff to say, hey, look, those are nice players, but we're not beating Bama with those guys.
Right.
If you want to beat Bama, you need to get at least two of the group of Merriweather, Williams, Green, and Bradshaw. And I think Green, I put at the very bottom of that because I think, if he has a top 5 and Notre Dame was in it, they'd be 5th. And if he's not visiting till the fall, then that's not really one that you worry about right now. But my concern is that they're going to panic and because here's the thing. Let me tell you something that coaches do. And if you don't think this is true, I'm just here to tell you you're wrong. I don't care what program you're talking about. Coaches will convince themselves of things that aren't true. And what I mean by that is like, look, we're struggling to get these certain positions. So I'm going to convince myself that this kid over here is a little better than I think he is. So I'm going to overlook his weaknesses and hype up his positives because we need a guy. And if I go spin this to my head coach and say, hey, coach, he's not that good, but he's the best we can get, I'm out of a job. But if I can convince the coach who doesn't really watch film, who's not super engaged when it comes to the day-to-day of recruiting, we've talked about that. Even though he's gotten more involved in talking to kids, that's great. But if I can convince him, no, he's better than we like. Look what he did at our Irish Invasion. Look at the times Jay Brunelle's another kid that you brought in, and he had a great Irish Invasion. You offered him, and he didn't do anything for you. Now he's transferring after a year.
Mm-hmm.
This is about, do you have the guts as a coaching staff to say, look, these are the gap closers. These are the needle movers. We're all in on those guys.
Right.
We've already taken our project with high ceiling. We've already taken that guy. You've got him in a Morgan Walker. After that, if it's not a guy that you're looking at saying we need to beat Bama for that guy, we need to beat Ohio State for that guy, then you're not doing it right. And if you don't have a coach that can win those battles, you need to find one. That simple as that. And that's about as close as I'm going to come to saying what people I think can read into that statement.
Sure. Kevin wants to know, will the opportunity for playing time help recruiting more than the transfers hurt? And that's interesting because I don't know. I mean, you can tell all these recruits that they're going to get playing time, but I would say that the evidence on the field would suggest that that's not the case.
Right.
So
I mean, you say, well, yeah, you'd say there's an opportunity for freshmen to come in and play, but who's the freshman since Dell Alexander's been at Notre Dame that's come in and played?
Right.
I think if I'm trying to think of this off the top of my head, so it's 2017 class. You have the 2018 class, 2019 class. I'm trying to think about this here. I think you had Michael Young had, let's see here. Michael Young had 4 catches as a freshman. Kevin Austin had 5. So Dell Alexander has been the receivers coach at Notre Dame for 4 years. 4 years. In that time, Notre Dame Notre Dame receivers, true freshman receivers, have caught 9 passes in 4 years. 9 passes. Notre Dame assigned Kevin Austin, Braden Lindsey, Lawrence Keys, Micah Jones, Joe Wilkins, Michael Young, Jafar Armstrong, who they moved to running back. Cam Hart, Kendall Abdul-Rahman, 2020, Jordan Johnson, Xavier Watts, Jay Brunelle. In those years, Notre Dame's freshman receivers have caught 9 passes their freshman season, and only 2 guys have actually caught passes. So that's problematic. I mean, when you look at it, so you say, yeah, there's an opportunity on paper, but if these kids are doing any kind of research into the Notre Dame program, they're going to see that this is not a place where there's any kind of trend of highly ranked players going and playing. Kevon McPherson says 2 ways to look at this. Either the Salerno kid has a chance to step up and enter the lineup, or they gave him a scholarship and Jay thought he'd be bumped out of the rotation, so he's leaving. Neither one of those things are accurate. Well, the first one, they may try to spin that, and I've been told, I haven't seen this because I told you I don't read other people's stuff, but I've gotten a couple of text messages. There are places where that's trying to be spun that no, they're going to be fine because Matt Salerno's playing. That's nonsense. Okay, that's nonsense. That's nothing but spin. You're being lied to if someone's telling you that. But Matt Salerno, if he does get a scholarship, would have nothing to do with Jay Brunelle.
Nothing.
I know exactly why Jay Brunelle left, and it wasn't because of playing time. It wasn't because he was getting bumped out of the rotation. It had nothing to do with that. So this isn't a pro Matt Salerno situation. And if Notre Dame tries to spin that, don't buy it, because it's just that's all it is. It's just spin.
Yeah.
I mean, would Matt Salerno be cracking the rotation at Alabama or Clemson or Ohio State or Georgia or Oklahoma? No. You know, and you know what else is also not happening? None of those programs have offered Nicholas Anderson. None of those programs have offered the kid from Canada. I mean, so at some point in time, we have to sit there and say that this is a problem, and we can spin it all we want, but when you keep doing nothing in the postseason against the best programs, or your offense has scored 19 and 17 points in your 2 matchups against Georgia.
Right.
The only time you've scored more than 10 points against Clemson is one when you had a receiving core built of small, fast guys, just saying. And then the other time is when Clemson was missing 4 of their top defensive players. And when those guys all came back and you played them again in the ACC title game,
it was different.
You got whooped.
It was different. How's that sound? Sean has a recruiting question. Again, kind of a behind the curtain question here. It says, curious what the closing process looks like for a kid on campus who they feel like is close to committing. Always looking for parallels between athletic recruiting and my business, which is IT staffing.
Well, I think for Notre Dame, number one is they don't necessarily look to close on kids that they don't think are ready to pop. And the reason for that is, Sean, is they have found in the past when they've pushed to get a kid to commit who's not ready to commit, there's a higher tendency that kid either decommits or leaves early in his career. And so what they do is when they sense that a kid is close to committing, it's about what kind of relationships have you formed with this kid? Mm-hmm. What are the hot button things that you know? What are the things we can do on campus to make them comfortable? You look at your business and things like that. Say, okay, so if this is a person that you really want and you have gotten to know them at all and you understand the important thing, hey, look, what's important to me is I want to go someplace where the people I'm around, whether it be coworkers or whether it be teammates, that they're this way. I want to be comfortable with them. Like all this stuff, playing time and all that's fine. But look, I'm going to spend, 20 hours a week in football, right? Per NCAA rules. Okay. What am I doing all those other hours? I'm going to be with my teammates. I'm going to be with my classmates, right? So I want people that have a certain agenda to, a certain likes, dislikes, comfort level. So then you surround that person with people that he's going to be comfortable with during that trip. Because you're never going to have a team filled with 84 people just like that kid. There's going to be 9 or 10. So maybe you introduce the kid to that group. And every team has kind of like their little groups. Like football players don't like roll in packs of 85, right? Like they're not going to the movies as a group of 85. They're not going to like, Outback Steakhouse every Thursday night as a group of 85. You kind of have your position groups. I mean, could you imagine that? Like rolling deep.
I've got this visual of that happening, by the way. So thank you for that.
You tend to hang out with either guys from your class or guys that are
your position group sometimes,
or guys for, maybe it's a bunch of guys from, 6 guys from Louisiana who happen to play high school ball together and they just clicked and they came here.
Right.
So you want to surround them with people that they're going to feel comfortable with and feel like, this is a place that I can make a home. This is a place that I can entrust my future in your hands because I believe the things you're telling me, and I'm talking to people that have gone through my experiences. And you also want to make sure that what Notre Dame does a pretty good job of, I feel, is they do a pretty good job of being honest with kids. Mm-hmm. And because they understand it's hard enough to be at Notre Dame. It's going to be really hard to stay at Notre Dame if you feel like you've been lied to. If they promised you this and then they didn't deliver that. And so, you don't tell kids, hey, man, the dorms here are awesome. And you never show them a dorm until they get here in, July. And they're like, what the heck?
Yeah, right. No air conditioning. Surprise.
Right. We're just messing with you. You don't tell them certain things that aren't going to be true. You be straight with them. And most kids like that. Mm-hmm. And that also means putting in with players who aren't going to tell you, man, every coach is the greatest and it's everything is wonderful. You want to be with kids that are going to be honest with them, the good and the bad, because that can be one of those final things that really helps a kid feel comfortable. Like, man, you know what, man, those people were straight with me. Like they told me all the good things, but they also told me some things that maybe aren't the best, and I feel like I can trust them. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing for Notre Dame that they do a good job of is it's building to that point, and if they feel they're going to get a guy. What are the things that you need from him? Because closing is not the same for everybody. Sometimes closing is, hey, let's bring out the big gun, Coach Kelly, or it could be a thing where it's to close on this kid. It's going to take a month of a different coach calling him every day, or some kids it's have some former player hit him up or something like that. I mean, there's all types of things, and it's different for every kid. And the best closers are the ones that can find what's the final button that I can push for this kid. That's going to make him say yes. That's ultimately the goal.
It all varies. The thing about recruiting is it is, wow, I said that like 3 times in a row, but it is very different per kid. I mean, yes, you can use the same roadmap maybe for one kid to another kid or whatever, but you have to tailor it to each kid. And that is super important because priorities are different for each kid. Mm-hmm. Early playing time might be a priority for somebody. Education might be a priority for somebody else. The future, NFL might be a priority for somebody. Like there's just different priorities. And there's also different groups of people that you need to impress. Like for one kid, it might be his mom. Another kid, it might be his uncle. Another kid, it might be his coach. You know what I mean? Like all of those things play a factor into recruiting. And it's up to the coaches to figure out what is the direction that we need to go with the recruiting. And good recruiters can do it. Bad recruiters use the same playbook for every kid. Right. You know what I mean? And I know you've seen guys out there like that.
Right. Well, even at places where they pay players. I mean, look, it happens. Not every kid wants to be paid. You can lose a kid by offering them money. I've seen this happen. I mean, Notre Dame got a DB back in the Charlie Weiss era. And I remember talking to his dad at the time, and he was like, yeah, some school, and it was an ACC school. He didn't say who, calls him up, and he's like, hey, what's it going to take to get you? And he starts offering him money. And so he's like, kid looks at his dad, and he's like, this guy's offering me money. So dad takes the phone, says, don't ever call my house again. If you do, I'm going to report you to the NCAA. Bam, click. Right? So you got to really know what a kid wants, what a kid is looking for, what the right buttons to push. And as Vince said, it's going to be different for every single kid. And I think there's positions on this staff where they do a really good job with that. Good job with that.
Yep. Tommy says, I'm guessing whoever the special guest was couldn't make it. Am I not good enough for you? Is that
No, we had a special guest. I
Yes.
interviewed Ryan Harris today. It just, the way his schedule is working out, we couldn't do it live.
Yeah.
But I'll have that up later today. It was an awesome interview. We talked about 25 minutes. We talked about Blake Fisher, and we talked about, because he's seen Blake at practice. He's been at the practice to see him up close and personal. And then I also thought it'd be interesting to interview Ryan about Blake Fisher, because Ryan's the last true freshman to start at left tackle for Notre Dame.
No, there you
back
go.
in 2003. And so, we talked about what are the unique challenges for a true freshman starting at a place like Notre Dame, because he's not taking basket weaving and, English 101 and home ec and things like that his first semester. He's taken a real course load. So, and Ryan is he's a great offensive mind when it comes to offensive line play. He works with offensive linemen, so I thought he'd be a great resource to talk about Blake. And so we had a really good conversation. He's extremely high on Blake Fisher, so you'll definitely want to tune into that later this afternoon for sure.
All right. RJG Irving. Hey, from Texas, what surprises lurk ahead? Should be fun. That's a very open-ended question, Brian, so you can take that any direction you want.
I don't know if there's any surprises. I mean, I'm hoping that Notre Dame can seal the deal with a couple kids that are close on, but that would be it. I mean, I don't know. Like, this wasn't necessarily a surprise. Jay Brunelle leaving wasn't necessarily a surprise. We've kind of, we've thought this might happen for a while, but I don't know if there's any surprises right now. And if I did know of some surprises, I think you know me well enough to know that I wouldn't be able to tell you. But that wasn't. I mean, I don't know of any right now.
Fair enough.
To be honest.
Fair enough. So Trey says, with the departure of Jay Brunelle, Merriweather, and CJ should see a great opportunity for early playing time. The recruitment was already priority number one, but think it intensifies a little more. I just don't see early playing time being a thing. I don't see that opportunity. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that changes this year. But if you look at the track record, early playing time is just not on the table.
Doesn't mean they're not going to spin it that way. And to back to our previous question about how do you close, I think that's the one thing you look at and say, look, we got 5 seniors on our team now.
Right.
Maybe 2 of them come back, at the most 3, and we've got a bunch of young, unproven guys. Look, and another part of it is, hey, Tobias, there's nobody else on our roster as good as you. So that's what you say to them.
Sure.
Not that that's necessarily true, but
I mean, look, that's a recruiting.
Right. Or you and Deion Colsey are the only 2 guys like that, and you both can play together because, look, we play power forwards together all the time. Look at our 2018 team.
Sure.
So, I mean, I think there's some pitches there, but I think they can spin and say, hey, look, this is why that guy didn't play, and this guy didn't play, and the other guy didn't play, but you're different. Your situation's different.
Sure.
And so I think that's another part of it. But here's the other issue with what I have, and it's not about what Trey said, because I think Trey is absolutely right. Those guys have to be priority number one. But again, I go back to, is Notre Dame based on what you all are saying, you tell me what you think. Notre Dame's not pushing for Xavier Bradshaw. They are now recruiting. They now offered and are pushing for this 6'3", 215-pound kid from Canada. There's other services. I believe Tom Loy has reported this, that he thinks that they're going to get Nicholas Anderson. So does it seem at all to you like Notre Dame believes it can, or is willing to wait to see if it can get both CJ and Tobias? Or does it seem more like to you that they're going to try to get one of them and then fill the class with these other guys?
Yeah. Yep. Guys that they know they can get.
Right.
I mean, let's be honest.
I'm just going by what we're seeing and what other people are reporting. Right. And like I said, I believe it was Tom and Tom, Tom's not going to just make that up just because, right? He's getting that from somewhere. So I hope that he's wrong in this case, because if they take Nicholas Anderson and they start pushing for this kid from Canada, it's not the look that we're looking for. You're going to get a lot of spin coming out of some places here if that ends up being the receiver class.
Yep. Brandon says Dell is the definition of insanity. I believe that is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result.
Yes.
Yeah. Can't say that I disagree with that. Brian says Xavier is a must get. Sounds like there's a free a scholarship.
You'd think so, but they're not really pushing for him. They're trying to get him to visit in the fall. And the reason they're trying to get Xavier to visit in the fall is because they want to see how things go with all these other big boys. He's a backup option for Notre Dame as of right now. Now, they could change course tomorrow, and I hope that they do. But as of right now, for whatever reason, Well, I think we know the reason.
Yeah.
I think we know the reason why Xavier Bradshaw is not a top target, right? I mean, do we get it now, right? Because they may change the offense in 2021 because the makeup of the depth chart is smaller guys.
It is what it is. Yeah, right.
But here's who Notre Dame – I mean, look at who Notre Dame has gotten since Chip Long left, right? They've gotten Jaden Thomas, who's over 6'1" and over 200 pounds, and they're recruiting all the guys we talked about earlier. What evidence is there that this staff wants to have athletic playmakers with the ball in their hands?
Right. Crickets. Trey says Bradshaw is definitely an upgrade after a year in the program if the Irish can close the deal.
They can close the deal if they want to.
Yes.
If they want Xavier Bradshaw, they'll get Xavier Bradshaw. The problem is right now
they're not pushing to get him.
Yeah.
D. Beasy says Watts is going to leave too.
As of right now, that's definitely not the plan.
Okay.
So
glad to hear you say that. That's why I threw that up there. They opened up the offense, but at this point, who will be left to throw to next year? Part of the problem.
Is he talking about 2022?
Yeah, I think he's talking about 22. Yeah.
Again, there's plenty of talent. It's do you have a position coach in place that can develop that talent at a young age? That's the question mark.
Connor says 5 years from now, we will be saying, if only they pushed Dell out when the red flag started showing.
Like with Van Gorder. Now, the difference is, and here's the big difference. Dell's a good guy. Coach Alexander's a good dude. Brian Van Gorder was not. And that's why it kind of stings to be able to be lobbing this criticism at Coach Alexander, because I have never, ever had anyone say a bad word about him as a human being.
As a human.
Vince, you've had some run-ins with him and some interaction. Run-ins, meaning just bumping into him.
I used to have a job at a local retail store, and I ran into him many times there and had long conversations with him.
Yeah.
Great human being.
Yeah, he really is. But the fact is you're at a place like Notre Dame, it can't just be about that. You got to get the job done. And the fact is he's just not getting the job done right now.
Yep.
And that's the difference between him and Van Gorder. Like, Van Gorder was a worse coach, but Van Gorder was not a good person.
Right.
Coach Alexander is a really good dude.
Yep. Here's an interesting one from KMA Preston. Any chance Notre Dame now is on the look for a transfer wide receiver to bring in?
I don't think that helps. If it's a transfer with 3 years of eligibility left, sure. If it's a transfer, because again, the issue is not 2021. The issue is what's going to happen beyond it. But honestly, it's like you almost have to go that route. If you're going to have a developed receiver that knows how to run routes and those type of things, you're almost going to have to go find someone from the outside. But you can't get into that every year because you can't know what year after year, what type of guys are going to be in the transfer portal.
Right.
At the end of the day, it still comes down to it still comes down to developing your players. And look, there's been some receivers they've looked at this offseason. The receivers they looked at last year, they ended up getting one in Ben Skoranek. But the fact of the matter is transfers aren't the answer. They're just not. Because look, there's no Justin Ross out there. Okay, there's no Devontae Smith in the transfer portal.
Right, because why would they be?
Yeah, there's no Chris Olave in the transfer portal. Right. It's putting a Band-Aid on a buckshot shotgun wound. I mean, that's what it is.
Absolutely. And I apologize to D-Rock Irish. They don't do coaches in the transfer portal, so that's just unfortunate.
It's a good one.
Notre Dame 2164. I just don't understand why it takes BK so long to recognize and act on obvious problems within the program. Stubbornness to the max.
Yeah, stubbornness, but also, again, you have to be involved on an every single day basis and be involved in those things, be able to make those moves. Look, every single coach makes bad hires.
Yeah,
Urban's done it, Saban's done it, Dabo's done it.
Sure,
everyone's done it. The coaches that win championships are the ones that recognize those things early and address it one of two ways. One is to get the coach to do a better job, which should always be the first recourse, except if it's a person whose character doesn't fit in your program.
Sure.
And then the second option is once you've kind of laid down the gauntlet, it needs to then say, if it doesn't change, you need to follow through with it. And the fact of the matter is Coach Kelly has been, I can only think of one time that he has got rid of a coach early when it needed to happen, and that was Charlie Molnar. But again, you could have pushed Charlie Molnar out after year one. I mean, Brian Kelly moved heaven and earth, from what I'm told, to get Charlie Molnar the UMass job, because he
because
that's what Coach Kelly does.
Wanted him to have a soft.
He doesn't like
spot.
firing coaches. He wants to get you another job. Well, the problem is when you've done the job that Coach Alexander's done, you're not gonna do that.
There's not going to be a soft landing.
Look at Miles Boykin and look at Chase Claypool. My whole thing is, where would a guy at Alabama have been drafted if he was 6'4", 225 pounds, and ran a low 4.4 and jumped 40 inches, which both of those guys did? That's exactly the problem. Like, with all due respect, Chase Claypool should not have been a second-round pick. And he wasn't a second-round pick because of his measurables or because of the combine, because he blew that up.
Sure.
It was because of his lack of development as a receiver. There were people that thought he was
even
slow.
said it. He even said it, though. That's the thing. It's like when he came back to Notre Dame, he's like, man, if I'd have known what I know now. And he had gone through like a rookie
And he wasn't saying it the way that we had that you're thinking, like, he was saying it like, man, I dominate, right?
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like a shot at Coach Alexander,
but it's insinuating. Yeah, exactly.
Right. He wasn't taking a shot, but
it was inadvertently.
It's a truthful statement in that a guy that was in the system for 4 years still didn't know how to run basic things when it comes to being a route runner. I mean, Miles Boykin should not have taken 4 years to develop, and he should not have been a third-round draft pick.
Right.
Just shouldn't have. He should have been Miles should have been drafted where Chase was drafted, and Chase should have been drafted in the first round. I mean, it's as simple as that, based on God-given ability, but they were underdeveloped.
Right.
And that's just that's the facts. I mean, it is what it is.
Yep. Coleman Smith says the staff still recruiting Tafiti, asking because will they take another edge guy if they miss on Moss?
They're not recruiting him anymore, and if they don't get Moss, they're just not going to take another edge guy. The only reason they're recruiting Cyrus Moss is because he's too good not to recruit. But they've already got 3 ends committed in the class. As of right now, they're happy with the guys that are there.
Let's see here. Gabe says, glad to finally catch the show again, and then asks about the Kelly making a change. We kind of talked about that, but I wanted to get him up there. He's got another one. Seems there has to be more than playing time making the receivers leave, right? If 4 left, they have to have realized that they'll get more PT. So what's the problem? We kind of touched on that already, Brian, that it's more than just playing time.
Right.
Yes. Let's see.
I don't think not a single one of those kids left because of just playing time. Playing time may factor in some of it, sure. But some of them left for personal reasons. Some of them left because they didn't feel they were getting developed. Some of them left because they knew the coaching staff had no confidence in them.
Omar says, I don't know what's worse, only having 1 19 and 20 wide receiver left, or the fact that they lost other wide receivers and the only impact is numbers at the position. The ones with talent didn't play, and the rest are not gap closers.
Yeah.
That's a frustration. There's no question about that.
Well, I think the thing you look at it too now is I believe that Xavier Watts, Lorenzo Styles, and Deion Colsley could make for a very good starting receiving core.
Yeah.
The problem is now if one of them doesn't pan out, who's going to step in the lineup?
Right, and that's why you have numbers. I mean,
right. And right now, if we're looking at the classes, 18 class, so far none of them have really panned out to the level. I mean, 0 for 5 as far as reaching your full potential. Now that could change this year, right?
Sure.
But through
they got an opportunity.
Through 3 years, I mean, outside of Braden Lindsey for a half a season and Lawrence Keys for 2 games, we haven't seen that group do much.
Sure.
The 19 class did zilch. The 20 class has done zilch. I mean, the 2017 class, you had Michael Young transfer out after, as a junior.
Right. They'll be playing against him this year.
He didn't make much of an impact at Notre Dame. So again, I ask the question, look, of all the receivers, look, Coach Alexander's going into his 5th year. All the receivers that have done anything noteworthy, there's not one of them was his recruit. Miles Boykin was recruited before he got here. He was in the 2015 class, right? Chase Claypool was in the 2016 class before that tenure. Chris Fink was a walk-on that was here before then. Javon McKinley was a part of the 2016 class, all before his time. And then Ben Skoranek was developed by another coaching staff.
Right, he was brought in late.
Del Alexander's had, 18, 19, 20. He's had 3 full recruiting classes. What has that group done?
They're all still here, or, well, the ones that are still left. Yeah, exactly.
But what have they done? Like,
nothing
very
to
little.
this point.
And hopefully, that changes. But again, why is it taking 4 years for that to change?
Right.
With those guys.
Gabe has an interesting question. How devastating would it be to June recruiting if Dell was let go at this point?
I mean, I think it would have to be determined by who you replaced him with.
True.
Look, here's the deal, folks. He's not going anywhere.
Right.
I mean, we could talk all we want about getting rid of him and all that kind of stuff, but he's not going anywhere. And if you were going to get rid of him, you'd need to have a replacement lined up immediately. Like, and that's also true. You don't fire a guy, especially now, because look,
Right.
Brian Kelly. This is the bet Brian Kelly's made. Del Alexander is going to be Notre Dame's receivers coach in 2021, whether you like it or not. So it's just going to happen.
It just is what it is.
Just like, look, I don't care what happens with the offensive line this year. Jeff Quinn's going to be Brian Kelly's offensive line coach as long as Jeff Quinn wants to be Brian Kelly's offensive line coach. Some may say that's great, some may say not, but it's just the reality.
It just is what it is. Yep.
Same thing with this. Coach Alexander will be the position coach this year, and it's but if he did leave, I don't think it would impact June recruiting a ton, because it wouldn't impact recruiting if you had a plan in place.
Sure.
If you knew, hey, we're going to go hire so-and-so from such and such place because we have connections and we know that he'll come. And we know that he has a connection with those kids, then you make that move. But this isn't a deal where it's just they're just going to go out there and fire him and have an open search for a receivers coach.
Right.
That would be a bad move. And again, at the end of the day, I don't even think that's necessary. Look, I still believe Del Alexander is a good football coach that can recruit well. He has to be held accountable for the fact that he's not grinding on the recruiting trail. He's not taking swings for home run players. He's not, doing a better job developing players. I think that's the first thing that Kelly needs to do is to say, hey, look, this has got to change, man. And it's got to change now.
Yeah.
And hopefully that conversation has happened. Maybe it has. We don't know the answer to that. And
sure.
But the guys that are leaving now, it's kind of the damage has already been done, so to speak. There's nothing you can do to fix it now. Now it's about going into the fall and fixing those things and getting over those things. But at the end of the day, if you look at the guys that they're pushing for on offense and compare it to the caliber of the guys they're pushing for on defense, it's night and day.
It's different. It's a different conversation. It's amazing that there's such a difference at one school, like from one side of the ball to the other side of the ball. It really just blows my mind. It's like they almost have offices in two different buildings. I don't get it at times. John says, can Reese intervene at all, or the assistant head coach? If Kelly won't listen to his assistants now, what makes us think he will listen and change the offense? We've seen the evidence that the offense is changing, but we have not seen the evidence that it's going to stay changed, I think is the best way to put it.
And we won't know that really until 2022, or at least until next spring. But at the end of the day, look, Tommy Reese and Mike Elson are probably the two coaches that could have Brian Kelly's ear more than any other coach.
Sure.
I think there's a level of trust there with Brian Kelly and with those two guys. But again, Coach Reese is 28, 29 years old.
He's still a kid. 28.
I mean, when you were 28, 29, did you have the cojones to walk into a coach's office and say, hey, this grown man who's been coaching as long as I've been alive needs to go? Right. I mean, come on. That shouldn't be his responsibility.
That's not his responsibility.
Not be his job. I mean, do you think Urban Meyer needed to be told by anyone on his staff that Everett Withers' defense wasn't getting the job done and he needed to make a change? Do you think he had to be told by someone else that, hey, look, this Tom Beck, Ed Warner thing is not working out? No, he didn't need to be told that because he's Urban Meyer. He knew that. Brian Kelly needs to know what's going on, and Brian Kelly needs to be the one to do that. He needs to be the one to drive that bus. It shouldn't be up to Tommy Reese to say, hey, coach, maybe we might want to think about scoring more than 14 points in these postseason games and stop blaming it on the lack of playmakers every single time.
Right.
And it's time to make a change, and he always talks about, we were completely overwhelmed by Alabama in the first game, and we weren't overwhelmed in the second game. We scored the same number of points. Yeah. So maybe your defense has gotten better, but your offense sure hasn't.
Yep. Chili says, didn't we talk about Brunelle transferring months ago? No surprise here.
Right, and it's not. I mean, we've hinted about this.
Overall, it's not.
And this is the point that we said earlier, Chili. And look, you're spot on, and it's not really a big surprise.
Yeah.
And Jay Brunelle by himself leaving isn't necessarily isn't something that's going to hurt them. What the issue here is the cumulative effect. If Notre Dame still had Jordan Johnson and Kendall Abdul-Rahman on the roster, then I could say, look, Kendall still has 4 years of eligibility left. Jordan Johnson still has 4 years of eligibility left, plus Xavier Watts, plus Lorenzo Styles. Hey, look, maybe they can focus on some bigger receivers in this class. But he's gone. Xavier Watts is not a guy you've really pushed for to get into the rotation. And Lorenzo Styles is a little different type of player. He's more of a vertical type of player than he is an after the catch kind of guy. And so that cumulative thing is what we need to be focusing on. That one guy like that is not going to make or break you, especially a guy that probably wasn't going to play much this year. But when you add it all up, and then you add it up to other issues that we've seen with the receiving core, like I just said. Name me the Dell Alexander recruit that's been a difference maker at Notre Dame. He's got 3 full classes.
Right. Still waiting.
Yeah.
Hey, we got a super chat from John. Thanks, John. Much appreciated. He says, when Coach Alexander was hired, what was his resume? What are his strengths as a coach? And are those strengths something that he can lean on now?
I remember you were Arizona State. Yeah, I was high on him.
You were high on him when he came in. Yeah.
Well, number one of the benefits to him coming in right away is he's someone that knew Chip Long's offense because they had coached together at Arizona State. He was at Arizona State for several years, and I thought he did a good job at Arizona State. And then before that, he was at Wisconsin. And again, I thought he did a good job at Wisconsin. I thought his players were very fundamentally sound. I thought they knew how to play the game. And I think he's from Los Angeles, but he's got a lot of West Coast ties. And the thought was that he was going to do a really good job of recruiting the West Coast and recruiting wide receivers. And really neither has happened, to be honest with you. And the guy that I thought Notre Dame was getting has not been the guy that we've seen. I mean, I don't think Notre Dame's receivers are as well coached as they were before, because that was actually one of the areas where I felt Notre Dame's players were pretty well coached when Mike Denbrock was here.
Oh,
because,
yeah, absolutely.
It wasn't just Mike Denbrock. It was Mike Denbrock and then Ryan Mahaffey. Tony Alford coached the receivers for a year, his first year with Brian Kelly, and then coached the running backs in the slots the next year, I believe. So there were some things that they did that I thought, boy, they were coached really well and they had talent. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think they know what they're doing, like scheme wise, because they're older. But like Notre Dame's receivers, name me the receiver at Notre Dame the last 3-4 years. You're like, boy, that guy is impossible to jam.
Right.
Or boy, that guy's a really good route runner. That wasn't already a good route runner when they signed him. That player doesn't. I mean, I do think they've done a pretty good job with Avery Davis. That is one thing. But then you wonder, like, well, why is the guy that converted from another position the best route runner you have?
Multiple other positions, yeah.
Why is he the best route runner you have? Maybe because as a former quarterback, he understands
he's doing it on his own.
This is what you need to do.
Yeah. Right. Another recruiting question from Jay. Safety Coville is off the board. I'm hearing staff focus more on Pope, Xavier, and Winston.
I believe that was Tom Loy that reported that earlier today. Followed up on that. That is an accurate thing. It just sounds like they want to go in a different direction. And based on the explanation I got, it makes sense. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing is that's who they're going to have to get. I mean, the safety board's getting pretty thin. And to me, Xavier Nwankpa is the only real difference maker I see in that group at this point in time. And look, I understand that sometimes you got to make decisions to move on from guys, but the fact is that Sherrod Coville was a really, really good football player. And Jake Pope's a good football player. KJ Winston's a good football player, but I don't know. They're not guys to me that move the needle at all.
They're not gap closers.
So they're going to really have to knock it out of the park with Xavier Nwankpa. And if they can get him, then I'm good. I'm good.
The Kinger 321 with official visitors again. Which recruits will be going to Brian Kelly's lake house?
I would imagine most of them will on the official visit weekends.
I would hope so.
I mean, I don't know if they'll do it the 18th or the 20th because that's such a big list. But I don't know. Well, the last time it wasn't even Brian Kelly's lake house; it was Brian Polian's.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Here we go. John says, is Hunter Spears playing offense or defense now?
Offense.
He was offense last
all
year.
Spring. Yeah. He's been offense since his freshman year. He played defensive line, and that's it. He's been offense for the last year, and he didn't practice at all this spring. So I don't know. He's obviously got some injury situations that he's dealing with, but he's on offense right now.
Kai says, I can see Amarion Walker moving to corner.
Not if Notre Dame wants to be a playoff team. I mean, I don't. Kai, explain to me why you see that one, though, man. I appreciate that. You're usually pretty good about that, but I don't see that at all. I mean, no, I don't see that at all. I could see Amarion Walker Yeah, never mind. I'm not going to say it. But, yeah, I don't see that at all.
Jonathan says, I was extremely optimistic about this season, but with Dell not getting on board with the rest of the staff, I'm definitely worried.
I get it, because that's a position that Brian Kelly has admitted has held them back, right? I mean, that's what he said after the Alabama game. They had more perimeter playmakers.
Right.
Well, apparently Nick Anderson and Alec, I can't, Manor, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, the kid from Canada. Apparently those are the guys that are going to close the gap on Alabama, because that's what Notre Dame's pushing for right now. I
just don't see it. All right. Brandon Krim says, I feel like other schools' coaches will use this against us with wide receivers we are competing for.
Yeah,
use whatever they can.
Sure.
I mean,
sure. I don't think that if they say, hey, you know what? Hey, you don't go to Notre Dame. Jay Brunelle just transferred. I'm like, who?
Yeah, right.
I don't know who that is. And I don't mean any disrespect to Jay, but it's just, look, if the receivers come out and play well this year, it won't matter.
Right.
And at the end of the day, we can vent and be ticked off, and there's reasons to be frustrated. But if Notre Dame's receivers come out and ball out this year, then it won't matter.
Sure.
It won't matter at all. It's really a strategic thing. I go back to say it again. Do you have the guts as a coaching staff and the confidence in yourself as a coaching staff to say, hey, look, yeah, these Nick Anderson and this kid from Canada, they're good football players, but we need difference makers. We need guys that we've complained about not having. I went back and looked up Brian Kelly's comments after the Clemson game in 2018.
Right.
And he said, they made more plays. They made more plays than we did. Well, yeah, that seems to be a common theme here in these big games. Their skill players make more plays than your skill players. So what are you doing different? What are you doing different than you did then? And to me right now, those guys aren't any different than what you're landing. Tobias Merriweather and CJ Williams are excellent players. Tobias Merriweather is a dude. He'll be in my opinion, one of the most talented receivers that Notre Dame will have signed under Brian Kelly, which is saying a lot because they've signed some pretty good players. But you need to complement a guy like Tobias Merriweather and CJ Williams with a different style of play.
Sure.
And that is what they've been super hesitant to do really for years, despite the fact their best receiving core by far was made up of small, fast guys. That's what I don't understand. I mean, by far your best receiving core was that group, and yet you just refuse to make that a priority especially when you see other programs are having success with that. I mean, look, if you can do what LSU did and you've got Jamar Chase, who's a bigger guy, and you got Justin Jefferson, who's a bigger guy, and Terrace Marshall, who's a bigger guy, and it worked for LSU, but they ran a completely different system than you. And number two, those guys were all freaky fast, and those guys were all coached up really well.
Yep.
So yeah, cool. Go hire whoever was coaching their receivers and bring him in, and then you can get away with that. But the fact is when you have bigger receivers, they have to be more precise.
Sure.
And that's the double-edged sword is you're looking for bigger receivers, but you don't have a coach that's shown the ability to develop the nuances of playing the receiver position.
Yep. Shannon has a very interesting question. He's got a hypothetical. He says, down 5 late in the fourth quarter versus Cincinnati. It's 4th and goal from the 5-yard line. What's the play call? Who are you giving the ball to win it all for the Irish? Michael Mayer is getting the ball for me. I'm going to run some sort of a crossing pattern, a little pick play action, and Michael Mayer is going to be my guy in the corner of the end zone. Ball game.
I think I'm going to try to use Michael Mayer to bait the defense deep into the end zone with a corner route and slide Kyron Williams on a route underneath it at the goal line.
That's hilarious. That's almost exactly what I was going to say, but I went with the Mayer.
I'd probably run some kind of movement with somebody coming from the backside. Like
maybe Tyree or somebody moving around.
Or awesome. Somebody bigger coming from the backside on the drag. If they overplay Mayer, you can either have the slide or you can have the backside route coming across. Because if they're going to take numbers out there, then that's going to open up some opportunities there. But I also don't like sitting in the pocket in that situation either, because I want to get the quarterback moving that way. If they do drop, is there a chance for him to maybe tuck
sneak
it
in from 5 yards out?
Yeah.
Yep.
But I like creating move because I always felt like when you move. So perfect example is we were playing a game. It was the last start of my career. We were down 20-12 with about 57 seconds left. Got the ball at our own 25 and no timeouts. Went down the field, and we called a play. And coach asked me what I liked, and I told him what I liked. And it was a rollout because I knew when we got in the red zone, when I rolled out, they were going to overcompensate. They're going to try to protect the edge. Well, and I knew we could get the drag route from our tight end backside. So I rolled out, flipped my hips, hit Josh Stark in the end zone for a touchdown, I just feel like when you move the pocket, sometimes, Vince, teams overreact to that. And They can open up some seams for someone to break back or from someone coming from the backside. So that's the other reason. Now, the drawback to that is if you start moving and there's nobody open initially,
you got to go.
Yeah, it could be problematic.
Did you get the 2-point conversion?
No. That's why I didn't bring that up.
Oh, sorry, I had to ask. Gabe wants to know how much blame should we put on Reese in this wide receiver exodus situation. I know he didn't recruit them, but getting them more playing time. I don't think he's in charge of getting those guys playing time. I really don't. I think that's over his head. That's
and he's been the OC for a year.
Right. True.
If the only way I'd put this on Tommy Reese is if I didn't like Tommy Reese and wanted to just look for any opportunity to bang on him. And I don't dislike Tommy Reese, and I don't want to look for opportunities to bang on him. So, this is a head coach, position coach problem.
Yep.
In my opinion.
Jay wants you to rate this potential DB class: Xavier, Winston, Mickey, Morrison, and Moore.
That's a heck of a DB class.
Okay.
Jay.
I wasn't sure which way you were going to go with that.
I'd be thrilled with that because, look, I love that corner class. I've already said it. If you get Jaden Mickey, Benjamin Morrison, and Devin Moore, I'm thrilled with that corner class. And then you get your number one safety on the board, even if you didn't have KJ Winston, that's a home run class. And then you add KJ Winston, who to me is a bit of a project. He's still got a lot to learn, didn't get to play as a full senior year. So he's a little bit behind from a developmental standpoint, but he's like 6'1", 6'2", big-bodied, rangy kid. Rangy, I said ranged. That was not my attempt to make up a new word. I meant to say rangy. Rangy kid who's got some tools. And if you got G and you got Walters last year, plus you have Nwankpa, you have an opportunity to then bring KJ Winston along. He's got a nice ceiling. So that would be an excellent DB class. Now, do I think they're going to get that class? I could see them getting that class minus one of those guys, and that would be Xavier Nwankpa. I'm not going to feel good about that until he's visited and they tell me we knocked it out of the park. I mean, because right now Ohio State's the leader, and until I hear otherwise, I'm going to feel that. But if the staff were to pull that off, first of all, what a boss move by Chris O'Leary in his first recruiting class, right? Like that's just kind of like announcing yourself with authority. You know what I mean? That's just like first day kicking in the door and be like, I'm Chris O'Leary, I'm here, and I'm going to go get the best safety in the country. Okay, that'd be a heck of a move. That'd be a great class. Be thrilled with that class.
Paul has a very interesting comment here. Talking about uniforms. The best looking Notre Dame uniforms were the 66 circa with the gold pants, the blue socks with the white piping beneath the knee pad and above the black shoe. Are you going to pull that up? I'm
going to try. I'm trying.
All right. Look, the Notre Dame uniform hasn't changed a whole lot over the years. Obviously, it's a very traditional look. I know people don't like the current gold pants, and I don't disagree with them at all on that. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I can find a picture of that.
Okay.
So I don't know if this is from that year 10-year era or not. So I'm going to try to find a picture, and Paul can tell us if that's the uniform. So we'll find out. Nope, that's not it. Let's see here. Pinterest. I don't have a Pinterest account, but we'll try it. We'll try to make it work here. So Paul, is this you tell me, is this the uniform you're talking about? There we go.
So many clicks.
Is that the uniform?
Oh yeah,
the white piping?
White stripe underneath the knee pad.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit too plain for me, but I think that's going to be one of those generational differences. But here's another one down here. Looks like that's from the 66 tenure. That's obviously later because that's Joe Montana, but that's it looks like era younger in his tenure. So yeah, that looks like which would be the appropriate time frame. Yeah. So
I agree. A little bit too plain. I mean, I'm okay with the traditional look for sure, but that is a little bit too plain for me as well.
Yeah. But hey, if they switch to that and you bring back the success from 1966,
then let's go.
Take it.
Yeah, let's go.
I'd rather win a title with ugly uniforms, and I'm not saying those are ugly, Paul, but I'm saying I'd rather win a title with ugly uniforms than have the sweetest uniforms out there and keep losing those games.
John says, does it seem to you that explosive wide receivers don't have the quote-unquote traits that Notre Dame is looking for? I don't think that's the case at all. I really don't think that's the problem.
I think there may be people who spin that, John,
yeah,
but
that's the spin.
I don't buy it. There was a question earlier, Vince. Did you get that question from Brandon about Koval? Because I did want to kind of address that one. I'm going to pull that one up here real quick. Brandon says, staff is no longer recruiting Koval at safety because they're confident landing their top targets. Is this a mistake? I feel like Koval should be a top-of-the-board prospect. I don't know if this has been discussed. We discussed a little bit, but there's a little bit more to it than that. It's not that simple. There's a little bit more to it than that, and all I can really comfortably say is I'm comfortable with their decision.
Fair enough.
And
you said you understood earlier. You understood it.
But it's not just about them being comfortable with the guys on the board. It's not just about that. And sometimes you got to make those decisions.
Old Grim wants to know if you can make a change at coach before the fall. Look, at this point, you can, but it's not gonna. I mean, it's something outrageous would have to happen, like off the field, to force your hand. Like they're not going to do it.
I mean, look, coaches make changes. LSU just fired their offensive line coach like a week ago, and it wasn't because they just thought they could get somebody better. It's just Brian Kelly's not going to do that.
Fair enough.
And in the middle of recruiting, I mean, if you maybe make that decision in June, July, perhaps, but I mean, then you're too close to the season. Look, we're less than 2 months away from fall camp starting. He's not going to change his position coach as much as we may want him to. It's just not going to happen. Hopefully, because again, here's the thing: a lot of these moves are byproducts of other things that can't be fixed this offseason. Right? And you know, no matter what you say to Jordan Johnson, what happened in 2020 happened. Okay. And you say, well, you know, can you fix those things moving forward? Yeah, you can fix them moving forward, but it's not going to change what's happened. Okay. Right. So for all we know, I'm going to give Coach Alexander the benefit of the doubt that he's going to make those changes, and I'm going to keep my eye open in the fall to give him those. But, you know, he's in a big time show me mode at this point in time. And, it's a thing. And then Jay also said, hold on, go ahead, because there's a couple that we missed that I wanted to kind of.
I didn't see those at all. Where are those at?
Are you not to the John A ones, or did you not? You went back up. Is that what I'm missing? So that could be it that I'm seeing those. But so we'll get back to where you were, Vince. But Jay says, would it be nice? It would be nice to have a Brian Hartline caliber wide receiver coach, because he's on another planet when it comes to wide receiver recruiting and development. So that's partly Brian Hartline, and it's also partly because Ohio State throws the ball a lot, and their receivers get a lot of touches, and it's been that way for a few years. I mean, if you go to Ohio State, you could be the fifth receiver, and you're going to get catches. That's the other thing, is you don't have to be the number one or two to get catches at Ohio State, and it's a big selling point. And they've had freshmen and sophomores making a lot of plays for them. So there's that thing where you say, hey, look, you don't have to be a veteran to go to Ohio State and make plays. I mean, that's just – last year, you know, you had Garrett Wilson was their number two receiver as a sophomore. He had 43 catches for 723 yards in only 8 games. The year before that, as a freshman, he had over 30 catches in 2018. In 2018, despite a very veteran receiving core, they got Chris Olave playing time week after week, and eventually by the end of the year, he ended up going out and making plays for him. And so, I mean, we've seen that throughout their tenure, that if you're a young guy and you've got potential, they're going to find a way to get you some opportunities, and they're going to play a deeper rotation, which is really what it boils down to.
Yep. You're below me on the list.
Yeah, so I just saw the super chat and thought that's kind of where you were, but I realized now that
it's all good,
I was
man.
a little bit below.
KMA Preston says, I know it's really early, but how has the 23 wide receiver recruiting been looking so far?
There's a lot of guys on the board, but they
haven't had a chance to narrow it down.
Yeah, but there's reports that Cardinal Tate, who 3 months ago was basically a lock to Notre Dame, there's a lot of people think he's going to go to Ohio State now. You know, we got to see how that one plays out. But I mean, there's a ton of good players on the board, but getting good players on the board is not the problem in 2022. It was not the problem in 2021. It's not the problem in 2020. Notre Dame's recruited really good players at receiver. It's developing those players. And now I think you're starting to see the recruiting be hindered by what we're seeing on the field. And then 2022, it's like, look, are you willing to see this through or not? I mean, if they're willing to see it through and make good look, I'm confident that this staff can at the very least add Bradshaw and one of Williams and Merriweather. I think they've got a shot to land all three of them if they really push and were willing to be patient. The question is do they want Bradshaw?
Right.
That remains to be seen.
Yeah.
And then the other one is, are they going to have the patience to not take these other kids to wait for those two dudes? Or are they going to try to convince themselves that this kid is actually as good as CJ Williams or Tobias Merriweather? That's what I'm afraid of, if we're being honest. I think they're going to try to convince themselves that those other players are good enough or as good as those players, and I don't think that they are. Look, if you didn't have a Maureen Walker in your class, I'd be fine taking either one of those kids. Both of those kids, to me, are better than Maureen Walker. But you already took him, and you took him really early, which is, again, a similar problem to what we talked about with Jack Nickel a year ago.
Right. Darion Thomas says, do you think the defense will take a step back or forward this upcoming season? I think as a whole, they're going to take a step forward. And we talked about the defense a bunch. Even though they've got a lot to replace, I do like where things are trending with this defense because, we've said it, they are going to be more ball center oriented, right? More get the ball, see ball, get ball, right? To keep it nice and simple. But there's going to be less on their plate, but it's going to be structured chaos. And I think that will benefit this particular group of defenders. So I think the defense is going to be better.
I think so too. I think it's a situation where when I look at this group, I see a lot of talent coming back. I see a defense that has proven it can develop the next level players.
Sure.
Right. So you lose Jerry Tillery, and next year your D line's every bit as good. You lose Okwara and Kareem and Jameer Jones, and next year your D line's just as good. You lose. You lose DBs from the 2019 team, and your secondary takes a little step back, but still is pretty good. Well, I think the talent level across the board is going to be as good, if not better, because I think there's some really good younger players that maybe don't have the experience of the veterans that left, but have more talent. We actually talked a little bit about the D line, Darion, and so look for this on the YouTube channel. I'll have it up later this afternoon, but. Ryan Harris talked about how going against Myron Tungavaloa, who he is super high on as a defensive end, against Jordan Botelho, going against Isaiah Foskey is something that's going to make Blake Fisher a much better player. So he talks about that as well. And that's from him being at practice and seeing those guys battle, and he's really impressed with it. And this is a guy that used to have to go against, Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware every day in practice when he was with the Broncos. So it was a very interesting conversation. So I'm just very high on the talent on defense, and there's going to be some people that don't like me saying this, but because it's going to come across as a knock on Clark Lee. I think Clark Lee did a great job at Notre Dame. I just think Marcus Freeman's even better. That's just my take. I could be wrong on that, but
it's okay though.
But that's just my take. I just think he's an even better coordinator. I think his style is going to fit better for what Notre Dame does. And again, not a knock on Coach Lee at all. I think Coach Lee's a great guy. I think Coach Lee did a phenomenal job coaching the defense at Notre Dame. The only criticism I have of Coach Lee was as a recruiter, but as a coach, I thought he did a great job. Great teacher. I just think Marcus Freeman's better, and that's okay. I mean, they're two great coaches. Which great coach do you like better? I like Coach Freeman better. So those are the reasons why. And I don't see a lot of juggernaut offenses on the schedule this year either.
Yeah, that's a really good
take
point.
Advantage of. And if they get a Caleb Evans, and then it's a. I no longer have any concerns about this defense.
Right. Jack wants to know, do you think with the guy from Marshall coming to Notre Dame, will we lose another offensive lineman to the portal?
Yeah, I don't want to speculate on that. I mean, because he's also just a one-year player, so I could see those younger guys saying, hey, look, I have an extra year because of COVID. So technically so you could look at Andrew Kristoff and say, okay, for example, him and Quinn Carroll, you could say, look, they're technically redshirt sophomores. Or you could say, well, with linemen, you could maybe talk to them about, hey, we plan on making you be 6-year guys if you do well. So technically, you could view them as redshirt freshmen eligibility wise. So there's ways to keep them happy. And beyond that, I've heard nothing from my sources to indicate that they're going to transfer. So I don't even want to begin to speculate that they will. So I'm not anticipating that. And if I hear something different, I'll tell you guys. But linemen are a different breed. Linemen tend to be a little bit more patient.
Yes, I agree with you. Than skill players all the way. Yes. Gabe wants to know what's the biggest disagreement that the two of you have when it comes to Notre Dame football. That's a really good question. What we eat in the press box? You're a big chili guy. I'm not a big chili
Not anymore.
guy.
Not anymore. Because I started making chicken chili.
Oh, I don't really.
And I love it. We actually had it for lunch today. I love it. And
what
so
do you put
now
in
it's
it?
like,
is that wrong to ask right now?
Just chicken, 2 types of beans, and chili powder and onions. That's it. That's it. And I cook the onions. And that's really it. So it's really good. Okay. But
I don't know. I don't know what we disagree about. I mean,
there's always like little things here and there, but there's no like big giant philosophical things. There was something we were disagreeing on a couple weeks ago, and I can't remember what it was. But you're higher on something than I am. I can't remember what it was, but yeah, we don't have any.
Nothing major. And if we do,
I think we're going to have some disagreements when we do these shows about the top fives. I think we'll have some disagreements.
I think we will too. I think we're going to come at it from a different angle too.
Well, I know one of the things we talked about is there was something about offensively that you just think something's definitely going to happen. I can't remember what it was, but there was something I was like, I'm not there with you yet.
Okay. All right.
I'd have to go back and listen to some of those shows, but there was definitely something that we disagreed on a couple weeks ago about the expectations for 2021.
Okay. KMA wants to know, is it a UNC-ND battle for Jake Pope, or are multiple schools still in the thick of it?
I think there's multiple schools in the middle of it. I think North Carolina did a great job this weekend with their visit, but I mean, for me to say that Notre Dame's in that battle, again, I got to wait to see how the visit goes. He's going to be on campus this weekend, but Notre Dame's going to get their shot. But I just need to see him on campus. Look, I'm trying to be hesitant with a lot of this stuff because these kids haven't been on campuses anywhere before, most of them. And so there's going to be a lot of changes going on that we maybe weren't otherwise expecting because of that.
Right.
So, do I think Notre Dame's got a shot with Jake Pope? Yeah, I think they got a good shot with Jake Pope. I think they got a good shot with KJ Winston. They got to get at least one of them to meet their numbers. But
sure.
Yeah, he's a good football player.
Let's see here. Again, from KMA, he says, do you think at least one of the official visitors this weekend commit shortly after the visit is over?
Yeah, I think at least one will commit relatively.
Pending.
Again, when you say shortly, I mean within a week. Within a week, I could definitely see them having some commitments from this weekend. For sure.
Yep. And he has a follow up here. Do you think Brunelle ends up at another Power 5 school? Have you heard anything?
I don't know. Right now, there's some other concerns that they're dealing with.
Fair enough.
I mean, I could see Jay Brunelle going to like a Boston college. Absolutely. Sure. I could see him going to Syracuse. Jay Brunelle's a good football player.
Yeah.
And from what I was told today, this is not a move that Notre Dame wanted to happen. They didn't push him out. They didn't want him to leave. This is what's best for Jay. I believe that everybody understands this is what's best for Jay. But this wasn't a I'm ticked because I'm not playing thing. This wasn't a staff saying, hey, Jay, you're not in our future plans. You got to go. That's not what this was about. So Jay Brunelle's a good football player. Could he end up at a Power 5 school? Absolutely. However, I have always felt and will always feel that when you transfer – I've always said, don't be so locked into going to a Power 5 school because at the end of the day, if you want to play in the NFL, they're not going to give a rip whether you played at Boston College or whether you played at SMU. Put up numbers.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're going to come look at you and then test well and put good film. Look, you got to put good film out. That's the end of the day. What it's all about. You got to put good film out. And you can put good film out from a lot of different places. And we've seen it. We've seen receivers from smaller schools get picked in the second, third round, things like that. You just put good film out. That's going to be the key.
I completely agree with that. Marty wants to know, any hope for walk-ons? Are you
any hope for what?
I guess that they'll play, or that I haven't heard anybody on the horizon.
There's no walk-ons that are going to help Notre Dame beat North Carolina or USC or and more importantly, Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Oklahoma, Ohio State. Yeah.
Let's see here. Get in the Rock. I like that name. That's cool. Get him Rock. Most frustrating part is we should be capitalizing on making the playoff and recruit the gap closers at the most important positions, quarterback and wide receiver. And instead, we have this and mediocre quarterback recruits. I wouldn't say Buckner is a mediocre quarterback recruit.
I think he's thinking more of now to the future, like Angeli and
okay, like moving forward.
I would imagine he's not talking about Buckler. I think he's talking about like now and then. You've got Angeli committed, and Steve Angeli's a good football player, but he's not a gap closer at all.
Yeah.
And then you look at 2023, and there's a lot of potential guys there, but they don't have one yet. So it's kind of like I can understand some of the skepticism that some people have about whether or not they're going to be able to get one of those top guys. So that's going to be a big thing for him. It's going to be huge for him.
Tommy wants to know how big are the lake houses. I don't know.
Once again, Tommy, not on point.
I don't know the answer to that.
Never been. Never. Tommy, do you really think I've ever been invited to Brian Kelly or Brian Kelly's lake houses? and if I was invited, it'd be like a Fredo moment, right? Like they're going to take me out on the boat and I'm never going to be heard from again. So, I have never been to their lake houses, nor would I ever go to their lake houses.
Christopher wants to know who the primary recruiter is for Carnell Tate.
Dell and Reese.
I figured. Let's see. Brandon says, get Nwamka and MMM.
Mickey Morrison Moore.
Thank you. At cornerback, and I'm good. Throw in Pope or Winston as well, and I like the DB Hall.
I don't like that DB Hall. I love that DB Hall. I mean, if you get those three guys plus Nwamka with any of those other safeties, that is you will not find 5 better DB classes in the country than that. I mean, there'll be some with better rankings and all that, but I'm just saying you pop on the film, you look at the talent, you look at the upside, there will not be 5 better DB Halls than that. There just won't.
Yeah. Well, here you go. Here's your answer, Tommy. It's large. It's behind my old high school.
So John used to roll with the popular people.
Well, and that's up in Michigan, because I think John said earlier that he was up in Michigan for high school like a couple of shows ago. I don't know why I remember that. So that's up in the lakes of Michigan, which I'm sure are large and in charge. Let's say Brandon says, is taking 4 wide receivers in the 22 class a must now? Have to get Williams and Merriweather. Can't afford not to. And then they really need to push for Bradshaw rather than Anderson or the Canadian. Their plan B, in my opinion.
They're not playing beast in Notre Dame. That's the problem.
They're playing B to everybody else, but not to the people that are actually making the decisions.
I don't think 4 is a must now. I am always nervous about overloading on numbers in one class to overcome past mistakes.
Yeah.
The reason for that is you tend to lose some of those guys. Now, again, they had 5 receivers in the 2018 class, ended up being 5. They only signed 4, and then Joe Wilkins was originally supposed to be a corner and moved to receiver. And 4 of those guys are still around, but part of that's because of some injury issues. But I would only take 4 if it's the right 4. I don't think 4 is a must. I think 4 is doable now if it's the right 4. But my problem is I'm afraid they're going to take 4 and it's going to include the 2 that you mentioned, Brandon, which then is going to say, okay, well, now you've taken a scholarship from, I'd rather get 3 now and just focus on, Bradshaw, Merriweather, and Luke and Williams, and you get at least 2 of them. If you get all 3 of them and you take that 4, then phenomenal. Right. But I'd recruit those 3 and get 2 of them, and then you're okay. And then use that, I just like spacing out a little bit more. That's my plan. Now, what Notre Dame will do, who knows? I mean,
exactly.
Who knows? I'm trying not to be negative today, but
I get it.
It's very perplexing, because
good word.
Yeah, that's a position that's very perplexing.
T. Stewart has an interesting point here. He goes, if the defense turns out to be awesome during the regular season, do you think that will make Kelly go conservative and thus reduce our ability to compete against the better teams in the playoff?
Yeah,
I think there's a real possibility of that.
Yeah, it's a great question, especially if the offense doesn't play great early.
Yeah, he'll go right back. Yeah. Yep. Because when you get backed into a corner, you go back to what you know, right? Yeah. Or what you've known in the recent.
And this has been my biggest criticism with Coach Kelly. And this is going to sound crazy, but hear me out. The complaint I've had, Vince, is he's too results oriented. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is obviously the end result of winning is the important thing at Notre Dame. But sometimes Brian Kelly has focused too much on the winning and not enough on the way that they won. Yeah. Meaning, I'm fine if we barely beat Duke. Yeah. I'm fine if we barely beat Louisville. We got the win. When the reality is I've seen Nick Saban be ticked off after games where his team won by 3 or 4 touchdowns because he knew we didn't play to our standard. Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, Dabo we beat this team, but we play like that against this team and we're going to get beat. And I think that Brian Kelly learns from losses. He doesn't learn enough from wins. That's my issue. And that's why Nick Saban's thing has always been about the process. Urban Meyer has always been about that. Going back to his Bowling Green days, it's the process. The results will take care of themselves. But Brian Kelly's become so focused on the end result that whenever you criticize him, he just wants to point to the record. Yeah. And I want to point to the record against top 25 teams. And he don't want to have that conversation.
Right, exactly.
And say, well, we have an Alabama and a Clemson problem. No, you don't. Going back to 2017 makeover, you've lost 8 games, all of them against ranked teams. You've only played those 2 teams 3 times. You're 1-3 against, or 4 times, or 1-3 against those teams. That means you have 5 losses against teams not named that.
Right.
You had a Stanford problem. You have a Miami, Florida on the road problem. You have a Michigan on the road problem. I mean, this isn't just unique to them. You have a Georgia problem. Okay. I mean,
I know
that's my frustration. So to T. Stewart's question, that could be my problem. Is if Brian Kelly's goal is to just make the playoff, then I could see him doing that. Shorten games, let your defense win it.
Right.
My hope is that doesn't happen. I don't think Tommy Rees intends for that to be the plan this year. But at the end of the day, if the head coach wants to do something different, then they're going to do something different.
Another super chat. John, thank you, sir. He says, I love how giddy we get with the D recruiting and Brian's face when we're talking about O recruiting. I want that excitement when the O, and yes, Michigan.
Is it just like disgust? Is that really what it boils down to, that I have that look of disgust? I'm trying to be positive. I'm trying to be objective, but it's just like, I mean, I don't have that proper shade of lipstick to put on that pig. I'm sorry. I just don't have it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I knew I remembered that the Michigan connection there. So thanks, John, for confirming.
A Michigan guy that became a Notre Dame fan. Now that's called intelligence, right there.
That's what I was gonna say. That's called overcoming your childhood, which I do appreciate. D-Rock Irish, and we've talked about this a few times, but he says, I've heard several times Notre Dame sends players to the scout team with grad assistants, never to be heard or seen from by the position coaches again. My words. Do you know if that is the norm with other schools?
To a degree, yes. To a degree. I mean, you're always going to have the scout team, the grad assistants, or an assistant coach on the defense, for example, making sure that the scout team players know what they're doing. They need to be able to give you a look and know how teams run routes and know how teams do things.
Sure.
So there's nothing wrong with that. But what you have to do is you then have to make sure that you're still keeping those other players engaged. You're still making sure that those other players are getting coached up. They're an individual that you may say, hey, maybe you stay with them a little bit after practice and, and these type of things, or maybe spend extra time with them during stretch, or, make sure that you get the veterans know, like, hey, you need to get those young bucks in here and watch some film and those kind of things. It's keeping them engaged. That's more of what it's about. And it's been more of an issue on offense than it has been defense, from what I've been told.
Yes.
From my various sources.
John Smith says, will there be any commitments after this weekend specifically?
I don't know if there'll be commitments, like if kids are going to commit the day they leave or while they're on campus, but I do expect Notre Dame to land at least a couple of the kids that are going to be on campus this weekend. Yes.
Nice. Okay. Am I Notre Dame 2164? Am I overreacting by wondering if we can keep the good receivers that we may get through recruiting this year long enough to even make a difference?
I think so, because the transfer.
He's overreacting?
Yeah, I think a little bit. I mean, I get it, but again, this is a little bit of, Jay's situation's a little bit unique. Jay went through a couple illnesses this year, and again, it's a little unique situation, and so that's why I say it's Jay's. I'm not banging on Notre Dame for losing Jay Brunelle. Again, it's the cumulative effect of it. So and it's not something. I guess I'd say, am I overreacting? I'd say let's have some more evidence. We haven't seen a lot of receivers transfer in the past.
True.
Michael Young transferred. I mean, I can't think of a lot of other guys that transferred before their eligibility was out or before they had graduated. Micah Jones had graduated, so I mean, it's a little different situation. I know that the transfer portal thing is new, but we don't know how kids are going to react next year with jumping in the portal when they see how few kids actually got Division I scholarships.
Sure.
So it's so new that we really don't know yet. And I think we need to I think we need to give it a little bit of time. And again, because this is just one off, this could be a weird off season, or it could be the beginning of a trend.
Sure.
I mean, those are the things that we have to look at.
Oh, let's see.
Can we get to Paige's question? Like, I wonder where that's coming from. A couple
Ian
spots
Book
above.
One? Oh
no, Paige Blue.
Yeah, well, I skipped it because I didn't really know what to say about that.
Yeah,
but Texas Tech is going to be good this year.
They got a lot coming back, and they got the grad transfer. I think the kid that was at Oregon, the quarterback that was Oregon, Tyler Slough, I think transferred to Texas Tech. But I actually like Matt Wells as a coach. He's the kid that came from Utah State, the guy that came from Utah State. So that's the most random comment ever, and that's why I wanted to get in there. It's the most random comment ever, Paige, but I love it because I do think. This comment right here is exactly what I was talking about the other day when we were talking about Notre Dame and the national championship. I think the Big 12 is deeper than people realize. Now, there's no one that's going to challenge Oklahoma for a Big 12 title other than maybe Iowa State or Texas. But what I do think is there's about 5 or 6 teams that are going to have a big say on who wins the league because they're going to knock somebody off. Like Texas Tech could upset TCU and knock them out of the Big 10 12 title game.
Somebody else. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and that's what I like about that league is, outside of Kansas, there's not another team in the Big 12 that I think just stinks.
Sure.
And I think that's what makes that league fun to watch is because on any Saturday, as long as you're playing unless you're playing a team called the Jayhawks, you better bring it. Because that team can knock you off. I mean, we've seen Texas Tech
have a head coach right now.
Yes, they did. They hired Lance Leopold from Buffalo.
Oh,
so
that's
a good
right.
hire. Very good hire.
I do remember that. Yep. Yeah. Did Buffalo make a hire then?
Yes,
have you heard
they
that?
hired Michigan's. Michigan had hired a co-D coordinator this summer or this winter, and he left. He didn't even make it through a full off season.
He wised up very quickly. Okay.
This place sucks. Yeah. I don't think that's it. He had a chance to become a head coach, but it's a better story that way.
Yeah, it's a great story though. I mean, that's great. Liam says JoJo to receiver if we get that DB haul. Maybe.
I like JoJo as a DB, but the reality is JoJo's a good player. He's not Savion Bradshaw. I mean, if that's your well, we're not gonna bring your Savion Bradshaw because we gotta go Joe Johnson. Say, well, do both.
Yeah,
do both. Yeah. So,
Justin says, I feel like the wide receivers are going to blow up, and this point will be moot. I think they're going to have a good season.
I don't understand what Justin. Could you mean what this point will be moot? What point are you referring to?
The point that we're all worried about the wide receiving group.
I mean, we said at the very beginning of the show.
Yeah,
this isn't going to impact 2021. No one's concerned about. This transfer impact 2021. Yeah, I mean, if they go out and ball out this year, actually, if they ball out this year, it's even more problematic
because guys are going to leave.
Yes. If Kevin Austin, Braden Lindsey, and Lawrence Keys have big years this year, guess what? They're not coming back.
Right, and Avery Davis already isn't coming back.
So if they blow up this year, this point will not only be moot, it'll be the exact opposite of that because then you're going into next year saying, okay, coach who's never developed a young player before, you had to develop like 7 of them.
Right, all in the same year. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but look, we said at the very beginning, Justin, you're a great questioner, so I'm not pushing back on you, but maybe you didn't hear at the very beginning, but at the very beginning of the show, we said this is not really going to impact the 2021 season. Yeah. If Jay Brunelle was forced into the lineup, that means disaster has struck.
Right.
Yeah. Did you see AJ's question a couple up above that? Did we ask that one? The one about the 6'4" receiver playing slot 3 years?
Little confused about the direction of the wide receiver recruiting. Are we going to have a 6'4" wide receiver playing in the slot in 3 years?
Possibly
based on what we're looking at.
They've also signed 2 tight ends in the 2019-20, or excuse me, the 2020, the 2021, and the 2022 classes.
Right.
So I think
that's your slot.
Yeah, a lot of 12 personnel, which is again, people are point. Oh, look what they did in 2020. Yeah, look what they did in 2020. They scored 24 points in the final 2 games of the year against good defense.
Right, exactly.
Right, you had excellent tight ends, and you scored 10 and 14 points, and 14 of those 24 points came in the fourth quarter when the game was no longer in doubt.
Right,
against the backup defense.
Right.
So that 12 personnel is only going to take you so far. It's just fact.
DBZ wants to know if there's any indication that anyone else on the roster is, going to transfer.
I have none as of right now.
Okay. Jay with a very interesting one here. He says Kyle Hamilton retweeted a meme to Coach Reese about playing on offense. And Coach Reese told him, quote, we've been on this way before now. Talk to your man, Marcus Freeman, LOL. Very interesting. Look, if Kyle Hamilton plays any offense, it'll be a very small amount, but it's still intriguing.
Hey, we talked about it yesterday. Like, they need to get him a couple things like they did with Charles Woodson back in the day and get him in the Heisman conversation.
Because that'll put his name way up. Because, look, everybody knows he's the best safety in the country. But if he starts playing a little offense, maybe catches
he catches like 8 balls for 150 yards and a couple touchdowns.
Like, good luck. I think that's fun to think about. And that's the kind that's the kind of stuff they need. They need to be thinking outside the box. That's all. I'm not saying necessarily with Kyle Hamilton.
But they're going to be looking to tee him up if you're on defense.
I would.
Yeah,
I would.
They are.
Yeah, that's why I'm throwing him like a fade or something.
Yeah. Like, you don't think that safety coming off the hash is going to be like hang up in the air, hang up in the air. So it just scares the mess. Could you imagine if he got hurt playing offense?
Good luck spinning that one, BK, in the post-game press conference. That's all I'm going to say. He would, but
yeah.
Good luck.
That would be bad. Be fun though. It would be fun. But I don't see
it would be.
And what does that say to your current roster?
Oh, good point. Yeah, good point.
Sorry, guys. You all suck. We got to bring a defensive player over here to get some balls. You know what I mean?
That's great.
That would not go well.
Jack wants you to apply to be the wide receiver coach at Notre Dame. No.
A, I would never do it. B, it would never happen, no matter who the head coach was. And C, I would lose all credibility for being able to be an objective person. And D, refer back to my Lake House comment with Brian Kelly and Brian Foley. Well, you know what they would do, Vince? Is they'd hire me, right? So that I left this job and then fire me the next day. I'm like, you don't have a website to go back to, so we don't have to get crap from you.
Yeah.
So no, I like the job I have. I like being my own boss.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm gonna say about that.
That's fair. Justin says a healthy Austin could start on any team in the nation.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, I guess that's just a cool
comment.
Is
that kind of a follow-up on the on the receivers going to ball out this year again?
Yeah. Yes.
No one hears.
We're on board.
If anything, I'm constantly getting hammered on Facebook and Twitter about my optimism about the receiver class in 2021. And Jay Brunelle leaving does not change that. You've never heard me say, man, because of Jay Brunelle, this 2021 receiving core is going to be phenomenal.
Right.
I've been hyping up this receiving core even after Jordan Johnson left. So you can point to all the studs they have in 21. I mean, hey, look, Braden Lindsey, a healthy Braden Lindsey could start for a lot of teams in the country. A healthy Lawrence Keys that gets an opportunity to play for a lot of teams in the country. Yeah, I get it. Don't disagree. Avery Davis is going to break out year. That's not what we're talking about. They're going to have football beyond 2021.
Yes. Yep. At least at 2026 because they're going to play Wisconsin. Let's see here. Paige, what was your reaction when Notre Dame was picked ahead of A&M?
They got it right.
Yeah. Short and sweet. I love that. Justin says, I'm more bullish on Madden than most here, so I feel good about the offensive line as a unit, barring injuries. Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hope you're right.
Me too.
I hope you're right, but I've seen zero film that leads me to believe that this kid's better than I think he is. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
Yep, me too. Richard says, great job, guys. Best information on ND by far. Which freshman besides Blake has the most impact?
I think Rocco will have a chance.
Prince Collie might have an opportunity.
I think one of the receivers will play.
Okay.
Hopefully two, and get coached up to do so. I think one of the backs will have a shot at some point in time this year. I think we'll see at least two DBs get some playing time this year. I mean, there's 7 of them, so I think at least 2 of them. And then to your point, Prince Collie could have a shot. Yeah. But look, any freshman that's going to play this year, any meaningful minutes is going to make an impact because this team doesn't need a freshman to come in and play. And even Blake Fisher, and this is something Ryan Harris and I talked about when you look for it, is like, look, there was not a need for Blake Fisher to come. Blake Fisher's not starting at tackle because they needed him to start at tackle. He started at tackle because he's just the best. He's the most talented offensive lineman they have.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, he's just a freak.
Yep.
So I just, I don't. I don't know if a lot of freshmen are going to make an impact. I think a lot will play, but I don't think a lot are going to make an impact. And if they do play a lot, it's because either a lot of injuries, which I don't see happening, or it's just guys are just too good not to play, which I could see being. This is a really good freshman class. I could see it maybe making more of an impact than we would otherwise expect.
Let's see here. KMA Preston says Colville just announced a Georgia offer on Twitter and used pictures of Georgia beating Notre Dame. I mean, he definitely had to search for those pics. I wouldn't have to search that hard. I mean, they're definitely around, I'm sure.
Yeah. I don't think that's a coincidence.
Shot.
Oh, I don't think it's a coincidence.
Oh, you don't think that's a coincidence?
The day that it's reported that Notre Dame
has him off to,
but that Notre Dame's not recruiting in him anymore. And the report was, I believe by Tom Lay, was that they just like other players better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
I love your responses. All right. Liam says, how much of the lack of development is solely on the coach? Can't the kids practice route running, et cetera, on their own? I mean, we all played sports and practiced on our own, i.e. shooting hoops outside, et cetera.
Yeah, but if you're out there shooting hoops with bad technique every day and there's not someone to tell you that you're not going to make shots like that, then you're not going to get any better. I mean, look, if kids could just do this on their own, why do we need coaches?
Sure.
And why did a team like Notre Dame, why were they so bad under, Ty Willingham, and then the first 2 years, those same players that stunk are all of a sudden, could play with anybody the next 2 years.
Yeah.
Look, coaching matters, okay? And if it's a kid here, a kid there, then you say, yeah, then that kid just didn't develop or whatever the case may be. Like, not every kid that Harry Heastan recruited panned out, right? Sometimes kids just get beat out. Sometimes there's other players that are better. Sometimes kids don't work. Sometimes kids get girlfriends and football no longer becomes all that important to them. I mean, there's all types of things. Sometimes kids have family stuff going on at home that just really distracts them and keeps them from being fully locked in on football. There's all types of things that can make a kid not pan out. But when it is a consistent problem over a period of time with a number of players, you have to look at the coaching when it's happening at one place. And, look, we're all so quick to just say, oh, it's the players. Look, the players aren't getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to coach. The coaches are.
Right.
And there's a reason for that. There's a reason teams will be unsuccessful bringing a brand new coaching staff, and all of a sudden they're winning.
Right.
It's not because those guys were doing 7-on-7s all summer. Because the other thing, too, is if you're doing something and you're not doing it the right way and you keep doing it and doing it and doing it, then guess what? You're training your muscles and you're training your body to do it the wrong way.
Right.
And so, look, yeah, you all played sports and practice on your own growing up, but did you get taught the 4 different ways to attack, with a corner route based on the opponent's coverage? Do you know all 4 of those? Do you know the different techniques? Do you understand STEM, attacking, your STEM, attacking leverage, manipulating a DB, all those type of things, when to break your route off, when to convert your route, when to bend it in, when to work back, when to sell into the zone, when to go across the zone, when to sell, how to beat man, what kind of double moves do you add? Do you have to bounce off? There's all types of things. How does your route adjust when you're 8 yards outside the tackle, when you're 6 yards outside the tackle, when you're 4 yards outside the tackle? There's a lot that goes into this that you should not be responsible at 19 years old for teaching yourself.
Right.
You have to be taught those things, and then you take the things you were taught, and then you go practice them on your own when you're not with the team. But you first have to get taught the right things first.
Yes.
And again, this is a problem that's been going on for 4 years now, where we're seeing the same problems week after week after week, which is exactly why it's the offense that tends not to be there when the games are biggest.
Right.
And the only time it's been opposite was against Clemson. And if you're an objective person, you have to say what was different in the Clemson game the first time compared to the second time. They didn't have their 3 best players on defense and 4 of their 5 best players on defense.
Right. Is what it is. Christopher wants to know which offensive lineman is Madden going to knock from the starting spot, Spindler or Carell? We talked a little bit about this the other day, and we figure it's going to be right guard. And so it's probably
not after Kelly's comments.
Well, I know that's a really good point. I would be upset if it knocks Carell out, but
I'm beyond trying to figure out what they're going to do with the offensive line this year. We're just going to have to wait and see, because I have very little faith that they're going to do what they need to do. And I don't want to keep harping on things. Look, I'm still optimistic about this team. I don't want to keep harping on things that, But it's like once I start getting excited about something, Brian Kelly's like, yeah, we don't want you to be being too optimistic. So let me say something stupid, that's going to, make you not be optimistic about this season. So
that's great. Bert, I don't remember seeing that name before. So welcome, Bert.
I think we've seen him once before.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome back then. Is there a position that doesn't require a gap closer to win a title, or is it more of having one at each level on both sides of the ball? Sorry for the late question. Great show as always. I think there's a couple positions maybe that you don't necessarily need a gap closer.
There's several positions you don't necessarily. I guess let's define this, Vince, because remember we've said there's two types of gap closers, right? There's guys that move the needle from where you are to closer to the teams that you're trying to compete against,
right?
And then there's the guys that erase that, right? So what I take Bert's question as is like, where are the positions you don't need Kyle Hamilton or Anthony Lucas, or
I like what he said here. Is it more about having one at each level on both sides of the ball? I think that is fairly accurate. I mean, if you've got gap closers, but you have a gap eraser at every level, I think that you'll be a tough team to beat if that's the case.
I think a very important thing for this is you have to have depth of talent, and what often doesn't get talked about enough, and not. Alabama has had a lot of championship teams where if you go look at the NFL, none of their guys from those teams became stars in the NFL.
Yeah.
None of them.
Yeah.
Alabama's had a lot of guys who never lived up to their draft status. Why? Because some of their players are overrated compared to what people think they are. What makes Alabama so good is they're good everywhere.
Yeah.
That's the difference. That's the biggest difference. I would argue now that Notre Dame's 18 to 20 rosters did not have the high-end talent of their 12 to 15 rosters. And I think the NFL draft can show that. You had, even if you want to go back to 2011, go look at the number of NFL players that Notre Dame had on that 2011 team. The problem is there was a big drop-off from the Michael Floyds, the Harrison Smiths, the Tyler Eiferts, and Zach Martins, and then the 18th to 22nd starters. Yeah. And then there was even bigger drop-off when you came from depth. So I think you need difference makers. I think you need at least 2 or 3 difference makers on each side of the ball. In my opinion, I think there are several positions where you can get away with that. I don't think, and I know that the recent history has told us that you need an elite quarterback to win a championship. I think that's more relevant to those specific teams. I don't think you need Trevor Lawrence to win a national championship. I don't. I think if you're strong enough at other places, you can win with a Jack Cohn at quarterback. If you're strong at the skill positions and you've got a great offensive line and your defense is strong, I think that, I think you need at least one impact player on the defensive line to win a championship. And we've talked about that. Like, look, Foskey, Myron, Adamiola, somebody's got to step up and be a dude, not just really good, but a dude.
Right.
I think you need at least one guy like that in the secondary. I do. And I think on offense at Notre Dame specific, I think Notre Dame needs at least one difference maker as a skill player. And I think they need multiple guys like that on the offensive line. I think if Notre Dame has an elite offensive line and one dynamic skill player, preferably a receiver or a tight end, and you're just good, like really good everywhere else, but like not great, I think that team can be very, very good.
Sure.
And so that's just kind of how I feel about it. I don't think you necessarily need 12 elite players to win a championship.
Right. I agree.
I mean, it helps.
But I wouldn't mind having a couple of elite coaches in the mix as well, but just throwing that out there. This is kind of a very open-ended question. What's the max potential for the 21 offense? Like I said, that's loaded because you could talk total yards, you could talk points per game. There's a lot of different ways you could go with this. I don't know if I want to say that there's a max because I'm hoping that, they're going to be really good offensively. But where would you want to put them points per game to make this offense, where it needs to be?
I mean, if they got to be 38 to 42, but more so for me, it's not necessarily about do they score 42, but that's because you scored 70 on Toledo and, a bunch on Navy. It's about. Yeah, can you be in that 38 to 42 range, but also can you make sure you're scoring on Wisconsin and scoring on, the better teams? But then can you score in the postseason? That's really what it boils down to. I think for me, John, the max potential of this offense is that it could be a really, really, really good regular season offense that's good enough in the postseason to win a title with your defense.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, I don't think Notre Dame's going to go out into the postseason and do to Alabama what Clemson did to Alabama in 2018, or to do to Clemson what LSU did to Clemson in 2019. Or to do to Ohio State what Alabama did to Ohio State.
Yeah,
I don't think what they need to do is, can you score 30? And be in that situation where your defense keeps you in it. You're down 30-27 with 2 minutes left. You get the ball. You've got your shot. Right? That to me is where Notre Dame needs to be because of the caliber of the defense that they have. So I don't think they need to be 2020 Alabama or 2019 LSU or 2018 Clemson to win a title. I think they just have to be significantly better than what they've been. If you can add a touchdown per game onto last year's overall stat, I'm fine with that. But I need to see more yards per attempt. I need to see more explosiveness.
Sure.
But the biggest thing is I need you to be able to score against the best teams on the schedule.
Sure.
Look, Notre Dame, I think, is going to be good enough on offense to be an 11-1 team. But again, we've been there, done that, right? Is that the goal now? Is that the standard? Is everybody happy now just making it to the dance and getting your brains beat in every time you get there?
Right. Exactly.
I'm not. And I know there's some coaches in Notre Dame who are not. So now it's about the offense kind of pulling their weight.
Yeah.
That's what it boils down to.
Liam wants to know, could Fisher play guard and Patterson tackle in order to get him to stay 2 years and improve his stock?
I don't think that would necessarily – I think putting him at tackle would be the one guarantee that he leaves even earlier. Because if he plays well at tackle – then there's really no look. I think Jarrett Patterson. I don't see him coming back in 2022. I'd be surprised by that.
Yeah,
anything can happen, but I'd be a little surprised. I mean, he's going to be a 3-year starter.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, could it happen? Sure. But what I'd rather see happen, honestly, Liam, is I'd rather see a situation where you put Patterson at left tackle, move Blake to right tackle, and put Josh Lugg at guard, or leave Blake at left tackle and put Jarrett Patterson at right tackle and move Lugg to guard. But if you're going to move Jarrett Patterson to tackle, I don't know if Blake Fisher would be the person that you'd move to guard. I think it'd be more about moving Josh Lugg. Because it was the head coach, Brian Kelly, not me, that said Josh Lugg is more comfortable at guard. That's what he said before spring practice.
Right.
So I think that would be, to me, a more real – because, look, Blake Fisher's going to be special. I'm not moving him to – I mean – he's better than I thought he was going to be. He was my number one player in the 2021 class offensively. He's more athletic now. He's lost some weight, and he's more athletic now. I thought he could be a really good tackle, but an elite guard. Even through one spring, Vince, he's already convinced me he can be an elite tackle.
Yeah,
and I didn't think I thought he could be a really good. I thought he could be like a, I'm trying to think of a type of player, but like a really good, like a second round, third round tackle, but a top 15 guard. I now say, okay, I've seen enough of him, and I've talked to enough people that know the position, that have seen him in more than I have in practices.
Yeah,
who say he's a top 10 NFL draft pick at tackle. And I didn't think he was. I thought he was good, but I didn't think he'd be that good, and I definitely didn't think he'd be that good this early. And
right.
Kudos to him for putting in the work to get there, because he is a freak.
How long it took ND to start offering 22 quarterbacks, do you like the fact that ND has already offered 24 quarterbacks?
Yeah, I think they've already shifted their way that they're going about recruiting quarterbacks, even with the 2023 class. I mean, they only have 3 offers out right now, but they're recruiting over a dozen guys. And I don't mind the offers. I care more about, are you recruiting kids actively? That's where really more what I care about. But yeah, I think there's definitely been a shift in how they go, the aggressiveness with which they go after quarterbacks. And it started in 2023, and we're definitely seeing it in 2024.
Liam wants to know, could Nakai M be the full-time nickel you were talking about the other day?
Potentially. Yeah, I mean, he's kind of got that body where you'd want to protect him a little bit inside, but he could be that guy. Certainly. There's going to be some limitations in that regards, and from the standpoint of kind of what we talked about with some of these other guys, is when you play some of those teams that are going to be bigger with their tight ends, or some of those teams that are going to, maybe have a little bit more size in the slot, that you can have some matchup issues in those situations, but most teams aren't going to be able to do that. So, I mean, I could certainly see a scenario in which he's that kind of guy. I'd still prefer a little bit bigger player. That's my only concern about Nakai is he's not a real big guy, at least height and length wise. So I think that's an area where you'd like to see him improve a little bit. And then Preston also asks, how likely is it that Notre Dame lands Nwankpa? Are we in striking distance, or is OSU starting to grow the lead? Well, I think OSU's growing the lead because they were already his leader and he got the first visit. So, I mean, I think the lead is going to grow. I think the big thing for me was, I've said all along, is if they can get him on campus, they got a puncher's chance. And that's all you can ask for. Not being able to get a kid like that on campus in the fall because of COVID really put you behind the 8 ball if you're Notre Dame. Because what Ohio State's been able to sell is their DB tradition, which is in the last 5-6 years is unparalleled. I mean, their DB tradition the last several years of just putting out first-round picks has been astounding. And there's nothing you can do except phone calls and Zoom meetings to balance that with Xavier. So getting him on campus is really going to be the big thing. The longer he goes uncommitted, obviously the better it is for Notre Dame. And if they can knock it out of the park, I mean, this is going to be his first chance sitting down, meeting face-to-face with Chris O'Leary, meeting face-to-face with Mike Mickens, meeting face-to-face with Marcus Freeman. If they can knock it out of the park, I think they'll have a shot. But that's the thing is if you could just get them on campus, you got a puncher's chance. And at the end of the day, as I've said many times, that's all you can ask for.
John says, is it possible for Notre Dame to land Bradshaw by default because guys went elsewhere? How do you feel about a class with only Bradshaw and Walker?
That's not a good class. I mean, I love Xavier Bradshaw, but and I don't think that's going to happen. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if they want one of the kid from Canada and I'm saying that because I just don't know how to mispronounce his name, and I feel like saying the kid from Canada is less disrespectful than constantly butchering his name. I mean, no disrespect to the kid by saying the kid from Canada. It really is just because I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I'll just call him Alec, right? If they want Alec or Nick Anderson, they'll get one of them. I don't see them missing on those two guys. So I could see a class of Bradshaw, Nicholas Anderson, and Walker, or Bradshaw and Alec and Walker.
Right.
And that would be a solid receiver class because I think those guys are solid football players. Look, Nicholas Anderson's a good football player. Alec is a high-ceiling, talented football player. It's just that those aren't the guys that you're going to beat Bama with and Ohio State with. That's just the reality. Right. But these are not bums. These are not guys who can't play at Notre Dame. These are guys who are going to help you continue to do what you've been doing, which is beat up on ACC teams, beat up on Navy, beat up on MAC teams, beat up on USC as long as they're still down, beat up on Stanford as long as they're still down, but you're going to continue to lose to Georgia. You're going to continue to lose to Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson until you can get the gap closers. Right. And those guys aren't it. So they have to keep pushing for those guys. I'll tell you what, Vince, we did an impromptu mailbag, but people were ready with the questions.
Dude, we're going to be doing this
a lot.
Is what it appears, which is not a bad thing necessarily. But let's see here. Yeah, the questions just keep on coming. I was kind of scrolling down a little bit, and they literally just keep on coming. All right, let's see here. Paul has more of a comment. Notre Dame always plays better when there's a scuffle, either during the game or before the game, like 88 Miami and 89 Southern Cal. I don't mind them playing with a little chip on their shoulder. Nothing
you know what stinks about that is, can you imagine how the media would handle that now compared to then?
You don't even.
It's like you see fights in the NBA and people act like there should be charges pressed. I remember when Dr. J and Larry Bird were like trying to kill each other on the court one time during a preseason game. I mean, like. If you had a team in the NBA that played like the Pistons played back in the day, you'd have people in the media like trying to get charges filed and just, this is bad for the sport. It's the media's become so soft in how it covers sports now. It's like you couldn't have a fight like that because they'd want you'd get 8-10 kids from each team suspended. Right. That's a fact.
Yep.
And whatever. I mean, nothing happens in those brawls that's any worse than what happens when they actually play the game of football.
Right, exactly. John is asking about the 12-team playoff. We went pretty deep into that playoff conversation yesterday.
I'm not trying to be rude, John, but just listen to yesterday's show. And also, I have an article at irishbreakdown.com where I talk about the right way to explain the playoff. I give my stance on what it is. And then I also have a podcast that I had done before with Bill Bender of Sporting News about that. So we're 2 hours deep into the show. I just don't want to rehash it again. But
Sure.
It's a very fair question. But I would just encourage you to listen to yesterday's show after the safety conversation. So we talked safeties first. I think the first question. It was the first
question from the chat.
But also, like I said, I have an article at Irish Breakdown. It's a free article at irishbreakdown.com. You'll see it there. And then I have I attached the podcast that we did with Bill Bender in there as well. So
I thought this next question is interesting. He says on the 2021 schedule, is there a coaching staff that you would take over the current Notre Dame staff? I don't think so. I mean, there might be plug and play a couple.
There's
guys
coaches here and there.
Yeah.
But as far as a full staff, no.
Right.
Because the positives you might gain at some positions, you're going to have big losses at others. That's the problem.
Oh, let's see here. Robert says, hypothetical question. Had K-State played us in the title game, I think we win. I also think we and the coaching staff prematurely think recruiting is going better than they think, and it sets us back.
Maybe in the past on that when it comes to the recruiting part, but I think the defensive staff has a pretty good idea of where things stand, and I think that they did not really start eliminating prospects until they kind of had a pretty good idea of where they stood with other guys. Offensively, I don't know what's going on there, Robert. And I think you have some legitimacy to that. I think Notre Dame not only would have beat Kansas State, I also think Notre Dame would have beat Oregon that year. Look, Notre Dame was a better team than what we saw against Alabama. Number one, Alabama was a bad matchup for Notre Dame because Notre Dame's game was all about what? Power.
Mm-hmm.
What was the only team in the country that was bigger and stronger and tougher than Notre Dame? It was Alabama. I also think that the distractions that were going on because of Manti before the game, because the players knew about what was going on before the game from everybody that I've talked to about this.
Sure.
That was not your typical
helpful.
Notre Dame team.
Yeah.
Kansas State, although I loved Colin Klein as a quarterback, but Notre Dame would have been able to beat them up. I mean, that's just fact. I think they would have been able to beat up Oregon. That was a really good Oregon team, but I think Notre Dame would have been able to beat them up. So I just, when I look back at those teams, I think Notre Dame beats both of those teams. I could be wrong, but I do. I think they beat both of those teams. I mean, look, Oregon, this is what Oregon did that year, right? They had a stretch this is how they started the season. 57 points, 42, 63, 49, 51, 52, 43, 70, 52, 59. They got all the way up to number 2 in the country. And then they played the first real defense they played all year, and they lost at home to Stanford 17-14.
Right.
Right? Because that's what would have happened against Notre Dame.
Right.
And I think that Notre Dame offense was better than the Stanford offense. So, and they would have had a month to prepare for Chip Kelly stuff. So, yeah, I think Notre Dame would have beat both of those teams in the championship game. No, even with the distractions going on, I think they'd have beat both of those teams in the championship game.
All right, DK has 2 scenarios. 1, Buckner is the starter. 2, Cohn is the starter. By the start of November, who gives Notre Dame the best shot at a title?
I think from the beginning to the end of the 2021 season, Jack Cohn playing at his best gives Notre Dame the best chance to win the national title.
I agree.
Tyler Buckner is a tremendous talent. He is a tremendous talent. He's played 1 year of football in the last 3 years.
Right.
I had somebody saying, well, I don't care who he went against in the blue gold game. That should matter. I mean, it should matter that he was making plays against the walk-ons. I mean, the big play he hit to Braden Lindsey, that gets picked off if they're playing against the first team defense. And it sucks because I feel like I'm having to bash Tyler Buckner, but it's like pump the flipping brakes.
Right.
He's not Trevor Lawrence. Number one, nobody is.
Right.
Number 2, Trevor Lawrence played as a freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior. Tyler Buckner played 1 year of football in his last 3 years of high school.
Right.
Can we allow the kid
and
to
Trevor
develop
Lawrence
a little
wasn't
bit?
the starter at his freshman year at Clemson going into the season either.
Right, but he was eventually, but he did play. And to this question, he did by the end of the year. But it's a completely different situation. And as I've always said, you don't point to the anomaly to define the rule. Trevor Lawrence is an outlier. He's not the norm.
Yes, absolutely.
I think since I was born, I think there's been 2 true freshmen to lead their team to a national championship, correct? Jamel Holloway and Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah. Tommy Leonard thinks you should be the head coach or be the wide receiver
Tommy's trying
coach,
to start stuff.
So
I will not. Yeah, let's move on.
But he also says under head coach Marcus Freeman.
Yeah, let's move on.
All right, fair enough. Who do you think makes the travel team this year, Audric or Logan Diggs?
Both.
Yeah, I don't see why.
I think I could see both of them being on it. Yeah.
Yep, me too. John says, does Foskey have the potential to be the best edge player in 21? How far is he from the ceiling?
Best edge player for Notre Dame? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. How far is he from the ceiling? Quite a bit. There's still a lot of way for him to go. I mean, technically, he's still got to get more proficient. He's got to still develop a deeper repertoire of moves, double moves and things like that. I think he still has a lot of look. He was primarily a tight end in high school up until the senior year. I mean, played some defense as a junior, but until Notre Dame convinced him that he was a better defensive player, most people looked at him as a tight end in college. So I think he still has quite a bit of a ceiling between what he can be and what he is, because I think his ceiling is that of a top 20 draft pick, and he's not there yet. But he's going to take a big step this year.
Yeah, absolutely. John Smith is looking for the official visit list. Do you have that on the site someplace?
Yeah, I can find it very quickly. So let's pull this up. All right. So, John, if you go to irishbreakdown.com, and I got to fix the front page. If you see up here where it says, see these 3 bars, just click on that, go down to ND Recruiting. Then right there at the top, you'll see Notre Dame prospect visit schedule. Click on that, and you will find the list. So
beautiful.
Try to make it as easy as possible for you.
Jonathan says, I wonder if Blake Fisher will stay for 4 years. He seems like a great kid, and I'm hoping we can pull off a Ronnie Stanley type situation.
The difference is Ronnie Stanley didn't play as a freshman. Ronnie Stanley played in 2 games as a freshman. There's a big. Yeah. If Ronnie Stanley would have started as a true freshman, the odds are pretty good that he wouldn't have been. He wouldn't have stayed 4 years. Ronnie Stanley was a 3-year starter. That's the key number. Yep. I think the only guy that's been longer than a 3-year starter is Zach Martin. Zach Martin's only 4-year starter. Now you could count Robert Hainsey as a 4-year starter, and I think there's merit to that.
Yeah, I would too.
But most guys, once you get to your 3rd year as a starter, that's usually the cutoff for most players.
John says, as far as offensive line is concerned, I can't see Madden having better practices than Christophic, Carell, Carmody, who is doing okay at tackle. If Madden starts, that's when I know 21 won't be great.
I have similar concerns, but I hope we're wrong. Look, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I hope that the people that are high on Kane Madden are 100% right. I hope they're 100% right.
It's hard to have that when you look at the film. It's hard to be in that camp. I mean, that's where I stand. And again, as somebody who obviously is hoping that our site does well and all that stuff, and as a Notre Dame fan, of course, I want him to be really, really good, and I want that to contribute to Notre Dame being really, really good.
Yeah,
I just don't see it on the film that I've seen. Now, maybe I hope I'm wrong too. Absolutely.
Now, if what you're saying is true, John, though, is if he starts and those guys are playing well, one of 2 things is going to happen. The staff is stubbornly not playing a younger player, which I don't see happening. I mean, I think if Andrew Christophic or Quentin Carroll or Carmody or somebody's clearly better than Kane Madden, I think they'll play that guy. I don't think they're so locked into this Kane Madden experiment that they're going to keep playing him. So if one of those guys beats him out, that's a good sign. But if they play well and he still starts, then that's going to tell me that, look, we might have been wrong about this guy.
Yeah.
And that's going to shore up a lot of things about the offensive line. I love this next comment, by the way.
Yeah, me too. He goes, I feel like the people who tend to blame players for poor development just haven't ever seen what a great coach can do for your game. Amen, brother. I think
that's 100% spot on to a degree, but I do think there are some people that just don't want to admit that the coaches aren't getting it done, because that's more of a long-term problem. If it's the players, you can just say recruit better players.
Sure.
But if it's a coach that's the problem, and this is why I think there's so many people that are unwilling to look at the areas where Brian Kelly isn't doing what he needs to do, because if you admit that Brian Kelly isn't able to do a certain thing, then there becomes a lack of hope for that to change as long as he's the coach. So I get that.
I get it too. Thomas is not on the Kyle Hamilton on offense bandwagon. Says it's way too risky.
Yeah.
And I believe that's probably where you fall as well.
Yep.
John,
I just wouldn't want to be the guy that's responsible for pushing to have Kyle Hamilton move to offense.
And then he gets hurt.
He gets hurt.
Yeah, right. John wants to know, what is your starting offensive line?
I would have Blake Fisher at left tackle. I would have Jarrett Patterson at right tackle. I would have Josh Lugg at guard, whichever one he's more comfortable with, left or right. I'm good either way. I would have Zeke Correll at center, and I would have a rotation at right guard, whether that is Kane Madden and Blake Fisher, if Kane Madden wins that job, or if it's Andrew Kristofic and Blake Fisher. Rocco Spindler.
Yeah, Rocco.
That's what I would do, and I'd probably put I'd ideally, if Josh Lugg is comfortable playing left guard, then I'd rather him be there, because Can you think of the left side of that line where Blake Fisher's your shortest lineman and Josh Lugg is your smallest size-wise?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 3rd and 1, where you're running. Everyone in the stadium knows where you're running. Doesn't matter.
Right.
You're still getting it. You're either running to them or you're running inside zone away from them, which means you're cutting back to them. So that would be it for me. I don't think that's what we're going to see.
Yeah, that just makes too much sense. Leah wants to know if you're doing a recruiting show tonight.
I will not be doing a recruiting show tonight. I have some family things I have to get taken care of tonight. So we will not be doing one tonight. I'm going to try to do one tomorrow night, but we'll have to see on that. Let's see on that.
Let's see. Michael says, you see coaches, I believe that's supposed to be coaches, not couches, take players and move them. And move them around a lot, like safety to linebacker, tight end to offensive line, but you don't see that with wide receiver. Why do you think that is?
I think you do see that. I mean, we saw Clemson did that recently. Darian Kendrick played receiver as a freshman at Clemson and moved to corner. Yeah. I think part of it is because I think it used to happen a lot. I mean, if you look at Pat Terrell on the 88 title team, he started off a receiver. Greatest story he ever told is when they were doing that one of those videos where he talked about how Lou Holtz goes, Pat Terrell, the greatest receiver I've ever seen until we throw you the dang ball. That was such a great scene to hear Pat Terrell, because I love listening to former Notre Dame players that played under Coach Holtz do his voice.
They all have one, too.
They all have one. They all have one. It's awesome.
That's one of the things we do on our radio show on game day. And they all, like you said, they all have it. And my goodness.
And it's all out of reverence and love.
And I think Beerline's might be the best, by the way.
Beerline did a really good job.
Beerline's really good. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, he did a really good job with it. But I think we do see that. But I think part of the reason we don't see it as much anymore, Michael, and it's a great question, we don't see as many kids playing both ways in high school anymore. And the other thing, too, is Notre Dame's expected boundary corner this year came to Notre Dame as a receiver. So that's true. I mean, it's happened recently at Notre Dame. So, but I think that's part of it is, Cam Hart was a two-way player in high school. We're seeing fewer and fewer and fewer two-way skills. It used to be back in the day, Vince, where if you were a great athlete, you were a starter on both sides of the ball. I mean, if you were a receiver, you started in the secondary. If you're a running back, you started in the secondary or linebacker. I mean, you're not seeing that as much anymore. Yep. And I think that's part of it as well.
Jonathan wants to know what the line looks like if Patterson is moved to center. Or stays at center.
Sounds like it would be Kane Madden at one spot and then Rocco Spindler or Andrew Kristofic at the other is what it sounds like. I mean, it sounds like that would bump Zeke Correll out of the lineup.
At tackle, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Not what I would like to see happen. I
like this.
Go ahead.
If Jordan says, hope this decommit opens up the door for Bradshaw. Obviously, he meant transfer, but I hope this transfer opens up the door for Bradshaw. If that's what it takes, that's cool. That's cool. I can dig it.
John says, which wide receivers on the ND roster can be consistently good enough against the elite defenses in the country in 2021? Who can join them if coached up?
Well, none of them are there now. I mean, none of them have shown that consistency now. But I think. And honestly, to me, it's not even about one guy. It's about, I think, a depth chart of Austin, a healthy Austin, a healthy Braden Lindsey, Lawrence Keys, Xavier Watts, Avery Davis, Deion Colsey, Lorenzo Styles. That group as a whole I think, could be very impactful and be impactful against anybody if they're coached up well. I mean, but none of them have shown the level of consistency needed up to this point. But I think all of those guys, to some degree, have the potential to be exactly what John's asking about. Now, they're not all going to be there, but I think they all have the talent to be there. We just have to see of whether or not they're going to be healthy and whether or not they're going to take the coaching, apply the coaching, do all the things that you need to do, be put in the right positions. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, player and coach-wise. But I think there's plenty of talent to get to that point in time for Notre Dame.
Sure. Jonathan says, did anyone see on Twitter that Blake was running 21 miles per hour? I actually retweeted that. So, yes, that was boy can move. He's athletic. There's no question about that. Let's see here. You kind of answered this already, but since Jordan wasn't in, I'll throw it up there again. Are you fired up for this weekend? Do you think anyone commits by Sunday? And if so, how many?
I think it's going to be a huge weekend for Notre Dame. I think they're going to get multiple kids from this class. What I don't know, Jordan, is I don't know if it's going to happen by Sunday.
Yeah, right.
Let's just say I have some stories written that I'm ready for when it happens, but I don't know if it's going to happen by Sunday. And honestly, I'm okay with that. I kind of like it when kids go home, let the emotion of it wear off.
It, yeah.
Talk to your parents, and if you still want to commit, then commit.
Then do it.
The exceptions could be some of those kids who maybe have already given you a silent commitment and all that kind of thing. But even then, you want kids to make sure that when they make their decision, it's not in the moment of a visit decision, because those tend to be the ones I get most worried about.
Right. Thanks, Jordan, for the love. Doing the best I can, trying to stick around. And then he asked me a question about the Cubbies, which I've got to jump in with. Do you hope the Cubs unload all the free agents to be and stack their farm system, or holding out for one last postseason run? They're a half game out of first place right now. I don't see how you can unload a bunch of guys when you're half a game out of first place. Now, if they take a June swoon, or the July gets them, then yeah, you unload some guys and you reload for the future. But if you're in first place or you're half game out, man, you're right there. Like you can't throw in the towel. I think that would upset a lot of fans. I would have a huge problem with that.
Yeah.
Brian, let's see. He's got another question here. Where would you rank Austin Berry on the safety board?
It's Austin Osbury. So he kind of threw them all into one.
Okay.
But just giving you a hard time, Jordan. Honestly, I haven't ranked that board yet. I probably put him in the conversation, with KJ Winston. I think he's got a little bit of a higher floor than KJ Winston. I think KJ Winston has a little bit of a higher ceiling. There's not a lot that separates them. I think Jake Pope's a little bit more athletic. I think that Austin Osbury's a little bit more, a little bigger, I think. But, he's got some cover ability to him as well. But right now, I mean, they're kind of in a pack with those guys. So, and then of course he brings the benefit of, he does come from a very talented family. So he's got a younger brother that's also very good.
Yep. All right, Brian, I actually do have to roll at this point. Got to do some stuff before summer school is over for the day.
Okay, so, well, you have fun with that.
The questions should just keep rolling in. I was really trying to stick it out, but you guys have been great. I think I'm going to see you tomorrow, but definitely on Friday. So we will see what happens. But Brian, I will talk to you later, sir.
Sounds good. Thanks, Vince. All right, Jordan also asks, when is Weeks supposed to be on campus? Jordan, I'm not trying to be difficult, but I'm not quite sure who you're referring to in regards to Weeks. So if you could follow up and let me know who you mean by Weeks, I will gladly answer that. RJG Irving. Hey, in a video yesterday, Jake Pope said Indy was talking to him about a couple offense packages for him, and he was excited about that. Wanted options on both sides of the ball. I mean, if that's what he wants, you tell him that, and maybe you do it for him. But he needs to learn to be a safety first. But during recruiting, people say a lot of things. Jordan says, "Is Amorian Walker looking at anyone else besides Ole Miss? Not that I'm aware of. Notre Dame isn't worried about it. They say that the plan is that it was just he was on camp with a team. It was a team camp. He was just there with his teammates and his coaches. He wasn't there on a recruiting visit. Of course, that's not what Amorian is telling the Ole Miss people, but that's what he told the Notre Dame people, is that nothing to worry about. I'm not looking at anybody else. I'm 100% committed." So that's what he's told Notre Dame. So we'll see if that's accurate or not, but that's what he told Notre Dame. Preston says, if Notre Dame lands the 2022 MMM class, again, Jaden Mickey, Mike, Benjamin Morrison, and Devin Moore, which group would you like better, our 2022 corners or our 2021 class? I'd probably still rank Ryan Barnes as the best of the group, but I think the depth of the 22 class would be better. So I think at that point in time, the 2022 class would be better than the 2021 class, even though I still think Ryan Barnes would be the best corner they would have signed in that 2-year stretch. Justin says, which games are both of you going to this season? So if Notre Dame does what we think that they're going to do and the press box is back to normal, we'll be at every home game together. We'll both be at every home game. Road games, if we're allowed to, we'll both be at the Wisconsin game in Chicago. The other road games will just be me going to the other road games. So, but any home game we'll both be at as long as Notre Dame allows it, we'll both be there. So let's D-Rock Irish says, remember before exiting, hit the like button, share, and subscribe notification buttons. Great show. Thanks, Fredo and Vince. Yes, I mean, you get it, man. If I'd totally get Fredo'd if I got invited to the lake, I would have to have like witnesses there and always be filming to make sure that anything would be out there, because I'd be afraid I'd get whacked. No question about it. Jordan Schreiber, would you like the Ivy League to be Division I again and be eligible for national championships again? It irks me because they won so many national championships in the beginning days. I love history. I love history too, but the fact of the matter is that they would never be able to be competitive in today's age like they were back then. There were just so few schools that were as big as they are now. I mean, that's just the way that it is. And they don't really care about being like that in football. So I don't think that would, I mean, I love history, but like Army's never going to be like they were again. Navy's never going to be like they were again. The country's changed. The game has changed. I mean, you saw a kid that, from Navy that just signed that was supposedly going to, sign a contract, I think, with the Ravens, and the Navy's not letting him get out of it, out of his commission to, they're not letting him put off his Navy commission to go play in the NFL. So, if you're a big time football player, what's your motivation to go serve if you also want to, hey, I want to serve, but I also want to play professional football. I have a much larger window to join the Navy at the age of 30 than I do to go into the Navy and then miss 3-4 years of football and then come back and somehow have a chance there. So those things are just, to me, never going to rank. M. Stace, 1987. Where do you rank Kelly amongst head coaches in the league? In the NFL? I've never considered that. So yeah, maybe you could follow up and kind of let me know by what you mean by league. If you're talking about NFL, then I've never posed it. So I'm not quite sure. All right. Thomas Walsh says baseball super regionals again, Mississippi State on Friday. Games are on ESPN. So is that definitely on Friday? Because I thought that I had read today that the games were on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday if necessary. So let me just look that up, Thomas. I'm not doubting you. I might have read that incorrectly, but I thought that it was so let me pull up Notre Dame baseball account here real quick. Yes, game 1 for Notre Dame and Mississippi State is on Saturday at 2 p.m. Game 2 is going to be on Sunday at 8 p.m. So the game 1 is on Saturday, is going to be on ESPN. Game 2 is going to be on ESPN2 and ESPNU, and if necessary, so basically their best out of 3 series. If necessary, game 3 is going to be on Monday at 7 p.m., either on ESPN2 or ESPNU. So Saturday through Monday are when the baseball team, who has had a phenomenal year under Coach Jarrett, are going to be on there. Jordan Schreiber says, if you haven't talked about Kyle Hamilton on offense too yet, can you give your take? Reese seems for and Freeman against. The possibility makes me very excited. Yeah, he could probably do some things on offense, but look, you don't need Kyle Hamilton on offense. Coach the kids you have up. Simple as that. I'd rather Deion Colsey take those reps. Plus, I'd be petrified of Kyle Hamilton getting hurt in a situation like that. Jordan also asked about the 12-team playoff deal. Jordan, I would encourage you to listen to the podcast yesterday after we talk about safety. So I dive into that for quite a bit. I also have an article at irishbreakdown.com where I talk about the college football playoff. And in that article, I don't like a 12-team playoff. I explain why. And in that article, I also have a podcast, or I also say what my proposal is. And we also have a video that breaks that down if you'd prefer to listen to a video as opposed to read the article. There is actually a video at the bottom of that I did with Bill Bender of Sporting News. So I'd encourage you to check that out. So let's see here. Next question. Yeah, righty. Jordan says, Jack Cohn all the way, but I want Buckner getting 10-plus snaps a game too. I'm down with that. Find a package for him. I'm all for that. Tyler Buckner's too talented not to play some way, somehow, in my opinion. He's not ready to be the starting quarterback yet. He's just not. Jordan says Notre Dame is recruiting even better than 2013 after the national title run. 2022 is going to be awesome, and 2023 is going to be better. Top 3 possibilities. Yeah, it could be. I'm excited about it. They just got to finish. Audrey, I am not going to touch your question because I try to avoid politics on this show. But yeah, I love that. Jordan says, thanks for all the shows. Y'all in the Red Sox games are my favorite listens to in the background. I appreciate that very much. Robert says, I think Notre Dame has multiple options. They could go fast with Styles, Keys, Lindsey, Tyree. They could go big with tight ends, be creative. I agree. They have a very unique group of personnel this year where they could come out with all types of different possibilities. Chief Brody says, not sure if I've already asked, but thoughts on Jay Brunelle transfer. Chief, I would encourage you to, when the show is over, go back to the beginning. We talked a lot about the Jay Brunelle transfer. And, to wrap it up and quickly, it doesn't really impact them in 2021. Doesn't even necessarily impact them in the future by itself, but the accumulation of 4 transfers from the position in one off season is a little bit more concerning. Robert says, okay, sorry, guys. I meant to say if we beat Kansas State in the title game, we would have thought the program was stronger than it actually was at the time. I think there's some truth to that. I also think, however, that had they won the title, it would have allowed them to go recruit at a level that would have been so much better, and it would have opened them up to hires that would have been so much, so much better as well. So, Audrey, I'm also going to send your question to Vince. I'm going to screenshot that and send that to Vince and see what he says about that. Liam Gaming says, well, they switched to inside zone primarily because of Madden. I mean, they're going to have to, but just running inside zone all day really limits what you can do offensively. And honestly, I don't think if he's that kind of player where you have to completely change your offense for one guard, then you shouldn't play that one guard. John A1 says, Brian, I like your offensive line. Thank you. I would prefer a Christophic Spindler rotation via rotation instead of a Madden Spindler. I tend to agree with you. Audrey says, how is Madden's pass protection on film? He's a pretty decent pass protector because there just aren't a lot of really athletic players. I think it was the Florida Atlantic game. He got beat several times. They put a smaller, real athletic kid on him. And he just smoked him on the outside a few times. He's going to face a lot more guys that are athletic enough to give him problems when he plays Notre Dame. But when he keeps his base and he keeps guys in front of him, he's got such strong hands. When he sinks his hips, he can really strike. It just times he gets kind of tall and he locks his legs and he gets knocked back. Those are the times when he can get in trouble. He's not super great at coming off combos and because he just lacks the athleticism to get out there. But in one-on-one pass rushes, he's very fundamentally sound. And he's very effective when he's not going against somebody that's a lot quicker than him. He does some nice things there. Paul Argentieri says only use Kyle Hamilton on offense in the championship game near the end of the game. I get you. I'm with you on that. Audrey says, how do you feel about Kelly saying Patterson's best position is center? How could we know? I think it's a great question. Is it genuine or is he wanting to convince him? Knowing Brian Kelly, I mean, I've given up trying to figure out what Brian Kelly's motivations are. I could see something like that. But is he genuine? Is it genuine? I mean, yes, the best position we know he can play in college. We don't know if he can play another position better because he's never been given that opportunity. But, I mean, who knows at this point in time? Joe says, it sounds like Coach Quinn needs to improve his performance to develop players or Notre Dame will start to miss on top linemen. If he did a better job, we wouldn't need transfers. I tend to agree with you. I mean, again, we're not talking about a guy that's 2 years into his tenure and hasn't been able to recruit his players. I mean, he recruited Jarrett Patterson and he recruited the 2019. I mean, everybody kept telling me Harry Heastan, I said, hey, Harry Heastan was the one that primarily recruited those guys. And we said, no, that's Jeff Quinn's class. He recruited the 2020 class. So these are his players. So, I get it. Audrey says, Brian, how does it feel to be in the minority of thinking it's possible that Jack Cohn has a breakout season? Seems like he's not getting any love from locals and everyone is focused on Buckner. I mean, I get it. It's the shiny new toy and, Jack Cohn's only here for a year and Buckner's the highly ranked guy. And I get it. I don't want my comments to come across as I'm anti-Tyler Buckner. I think Tyler Buckner is outstanding talent. It just, he's inexperienced and he needs time. He needs time. John A1 says, if Notre Dame lands Evans, how do you see the other DBs being used? What would defensive strategy would he open up? I think number one, he makes you way more comfortable playing man coverage. He plays a ton of man coverage at Tulsa, and he plays it at a high level against some very good receivers. So I think he gives you the ability to be a lot more aggressive because he's very good in not just man coverage, he's good in press coverage. And so he played in 5 games against Power 5 teams. He played 2 games against Oklahoma State, played against Mississippi State, Texas, and Michigan State. In those 5 games, he gave up 7 completions for 45 yards in those games combined. So it's not like he hasn't played against Power 5 teams. He's played against them and played well against them. So he would give you a very, very good cover corner. I think it gives you some flexibility, maybe move Clarence Lewis into the slot, maybe put him in the boundary if Cam Hart's not ready to play there. Maybe you could put a Caleb in the boundary if Cam Hart falters or gets hurt. You could use Tariq Bracy more as a slot. I think it gives you a lot of flexibility with those other corners. But he to me would be Notre Dame's best corner the minute he stepped foot on campus. Preston says, any changes, updates with running back recruiting, or is it kind of stagnant? It's stagnant in regards to news, Preston, because they haven't visited yet. But Dallin Hayden's going to be on campus this weekend. Nicholas Singleton will be on campus the following weekend, and then Gavin Sawchuk the weekend after that, and that's when we're going to know. But until then, I mean, not a whole lot is changed. MLA, he says, different topic, but think you are way underestimating the transfer Kane. I hope so. I mean, I hope so, Emma. I hope that I am wrong about him. My opinion comes simply from watching film, and I could be wrong. He could end up being better than I think. But, you know, I've sent his film to NFL draft analysts that I know. I've sent his film to coaches that I know. I've sent his film to offensive linemen that I know. And I've asked, hey, what am I missing here? Because I want to be proven wrong. I want somebody that knows the position to tell me, hey, look, here's where you're wrong. Here's where you're missing the boat. And no one's convinced me of it yet. So if you broke down the film, Emma, and you think he's a better player than I think he is, I think we can both agree on this. We both hope you're right. Because if he's as good as you think and as Notre Dame thinks, that's huge for Notre Dame. Huge for Notre Dame. Very, very, very huge. M. Stace, 1987, says, I'm in college football. So this was the where does Kelly rank? So I've said before, I think you can make a case anywhere from 3 to 5 right now with him, you know, especially since Urban Meyer's out. You know, I think for me, I definitely think Saban, Dabo are ahead of him. I put Lincoln Riley ahead of him. I think you could make a case for Ryan Day, but my pushback on Ryan Day is he's only been there 2 years. Larry Coker won a title in his first 2 years, and I think we can all look back and say that was him riding the coattails of the previous situation. I think Ryan Day is a lot better than Larry Coker. I'm just saying he needs to prove it. Whereas Lincoln Riley's been there for 4 years. They've been very good every year. His one down team was this past year where they still went 9-2 and smashed Florida in the postseason. I mean, nobody wanted to play Oklahoma at the end of the season, and they come into the season and it's preseason top 5. So I think those coaches are there. I think if you look at after that, I'd take Brian Kelly over guys like Jimbo Fisher and Ed Orgeron and a lot of those other James Franklin. I'd take him over all those coaches, but I think there's a big gap right now between the top 3 and where Notre Dame is. All righty, here we go. Let's see if Oregon fans. I don't have time for Oregon fans. Let's get some more questions here. Yeah. So Thomas Walsh says, I live 10 minutes from outside of Portland. Oregon fans are brutal and delusional and have the audacity to talk stuff about Notre Dame. I skewer them on the regular. Sid Irish goes, 0 is for 0 championships for Oregon. Tell them that. That's great. All right. Latchy says, my first thought, I hope I got that right. I apologize if I didn't. Says, my first thought when I saw Notre Dame pushing for Cade Madden was, does the staff know something about Jared Patterson's health recovery than they are saying? Is that a reasonable worry? Not that I've heard. From everything I've heard, Jarrett got his everything taken. I mean, he got his final surgery before the spring even started. So I don't think that is an issue. And I haven't heard any different. You know, I'll keep asking, but I haven't heard anything different. So that's Joe says, asks, outside of Evans, is Notre Dame looking at other options in the transfer portal? Not actively from the standpoint of there's guys are pushing for, but I think Notre Dame is always checking to see kind of how things go. So we'll kind of see how it is. Let's see some questions here. Yeah, Audrey, I appreciate the opportunity for comedic relief, but some topics, some people just don't know how to laugh at. I laughed at it, but I think some people probably get a little offended. All right. Preston asks, how big of a deal is Evans' Georgia offer? Does anyone know if he has a lot of interest in them? My understanding is that it's not really going to change anything for him. We'll have to find out, but my understanding is it's not going to change anything for him. I think it's Notre Dame, Missouri, and then the next one is Texas. Sid Irish says, we need to crush the visits this next few weeks until I see a kid commit. I'm skeptical. I understand that, but I think Notre Dame has positioned themselves, especially on defense, to really finish at a high level here down the stretch. John A1 missed Tony Alford being an assistant on staff. Wish he and Stan were on this year's staff with Alford with receivers this go around. He was money with Riddick and company. He was more of a running backs guy. I mean, I think Mike Denbrock's the one that did a lot of the really good receiver recruiting at Notre Dame. But yeah, Tony could recruit as well, no question. And Stan obviously was not just a great recruiter, but an elite coach. I subscribe to this cool clinics thing, and it's all these offensive line coaches from the NFL and college football, getting together, talking. And there was multiple times where they referenced Harry Hiestand. I mean, these NFL coaches, college coaches talking about the influence Harry Hiestand had on him. He's big time there. So he would have been great. Preston says, more of a random question and purely hypothetical, but have you mentioned Braum as a potential Kelly successor? How you feel about Tom Allen? I need to see him do more than one good season. I think Tom Allen's a great dude. He's a great motivator. He's a pretty good D coordinator too, but I need to see him do it for a little bit longer before I'm ready to start thinking about him being a Notre Dame caliber guy, but seems like a great guy. So I'd love to see him be successful. Alrighty, let's see here. Michael Morris says, my brother and I would go golfing with Tony Rice, and he would talk like Lou sometimes. Rice, if you could throw like you hit a golf ball, we would never lose a game. Go find your dartboard, son. That's great. That's great. Caleb Collins, a good question. If Notre Dame gets to the championship this year, does that make BK stay with RPO, or does he go back to the power forward, wide receiver, and complicated offense? It's a good question. I mean, I think it would depend on if they get to the championship game, but they're doing it with an average offense, I think he's going to change it. But if they're out there scoring 40-plus points a game and they're dynamic and they're doing quick game and screens and those things are ripping people off, yeah, I think he'll adjust. Look, Brian Kelly doesn't not want to win. He believes that this is the right way to win. I mean, that's the thing is we have to understand this about the complicated offense and power forward football. He's not doing that to tick me off or to – because for any other negative reason, he thinks, I think wrongly, that that's the best way to win at Notre Dame. I just don't agree with it. But if it proves to be, if another way proves to work, then he'd be willing to do that. Audrey says, how is it possible that someone could be a second-team All-American and not be able to run outside zone? I mean, I'm not the person to ask. I mean, I don't know if they're putting too much hype on Pro Football Focus numbers. You'd have to ask some of the people that watches film. I mean, look, I'm not going to change my opinion because the Associated Press or whoever else has them second team. I'm going off the film. That's all I can do. But I'll say it again. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I hope he's as good as people think he is. John A1, IB has discussed not having it all together at one time with the players. I think it's the same with the coaching staff. Yeah, meaning like there's certain coaches that if you could take this coach from this team and this coach from that team, that'd be one heck of a coaching staff. Same thing with the players. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. It's just seems like Coach Kelly can never quite get all the pieces together at one time. And that's the difference between being a 10-1 team that goes to the playoff or 12-0 team that goes to the playoff and is not really competitive in the championship game and a team that is winning those championships. I think to me, that's the difference. And he's got to be able to put it all together, in my opinion. Preston says, with a few more kids leaving the program, how many kids do you think Notre Dame will take in the 22 class? So when I did the breakdown of saying Notre Dame could get to 24, 25, it was anticipating that there will be some transfers or some medicals that we don't know about. Obviously, Jay Brunelle fits that category. So I still think 24, 25 is the max that they can get to, unless there's even more unsuspecting losses in the program. And some of them could be positive. Some could be like, hey, we thought we were going to get these two kids back, and they just both blew up this year, and they're going to the NFL, and so we got some extra scholarships. It's not always negative like an injury or a transfer. Sometimes it's a guy breaks out, and he's better than you think he's going to be, and he blows up, and he goes to the NFL. That's good for your program, and that's obviously good for the kids. John says, this is great. Love your show. This is the last two questions. Love your show. The only problem is that I'm here all day watching. I mean, I get it. And I apologize for the great show, but we appreciate you being a part of it, John. I really do. This is a lot of fun. We're going to wrap up here. John A1, thanks to IB for another great show. I appreciate that. But that's going to be it for today's show. And for the sake of John, who needs to get back to work, we're going to wrap today's show up. But I appreciate everybody being with us today. A lot of good things we talked about today, some concerns and question marks we have today, and that's the nature of Notre Dame football until they win a championship. So hopefully they can see these things and make those improvements and get to that next step. Until then, we'll have certainly plenty of things to talk about. So we'll be back tomorrow. We will not have a recruiting show tonight. We'll be back tomorrow at 1 o'clock. And then, of course, on Friday, we're still going to have our Friday mailbag. So just today was sort of an impromptu mailbag. It's not going to change the show for Friday. Later this afternoon, I will have the video of Ryan Harris breaking down Blake Fisher. So make sure you check that out. It's really good. He is incredibly high on Blake Fisher. So definitely make sure you check that out. Everybody have a great, safe, awesome rest of your day. We're finally getting a little bit of sun here in South Bend. So I'm going to try to get some things taken care of at home. So everybody enjoy it, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.